Hi, it's Ollie from Cross Platform Gaming, and welcome today to a tier list, another tier list, this time of the Rockstar games. Just wanted to do a quick disclaimer before we get into it and before I introduce you to the other member of XPL that's with me today. We didn't make this tier, so if the games are in here that you've played that aren't on here, it's not our fault this time. There was some comments on the previous Ubisoft one, and that's a video you need to go and see as well, and we'll link that in the top corner. But yeah, we didn't make the tier. So it's not our fault that those games aren't on there if there are any other ones. Of course, it's opinion based. So if you don't agree with some things that we've said, drop your comments in the comment section down below. Let us know why we're wrong. Let us know why you're right. And let's get a good debate going like we had on the Ubisoft video, because there's some good stuff going on in the comment section of that one. But yeah, it's Rockstar. It's another tier list. So let's get started. Today, I'm joined once again with Dan. Say hello, Dan.
Hello, Dan, I guess.
Hello.
Yeah, so I think for this one, both of us have played, I would say, 90%, if not all of these games, across the two of us. So hopefully this one will go a little bit better because, like you said, in the comment section on the Ubisoft tier list, a couple of people were going off at us for not playing games properly or not giving them the time of day, and they were like, "Oh, just because you never played it doesn't mean it's a bad game," which we agreed with, and I think we said in the video itself. So yeah, I think we did have some good comments, especially I was talking about For Honor and how I didn't really get on with it, and then there was a few comments with people saying, "Look, yeah, persevere with it, and actually it's a really good game." So maybe I'll give that another shot in the future. But I'm excited for this tier list because yeah, this means a lot to both of us, I think.
Oh yeah, same. Rockstar is it's the epitome for me. It's number one. But just to touch on what you were saying as well, I remember seeing the comment about For Honor. There it was a lot of good constructive stuff in there. And when we say we've got opinions and we could be wrong, we're not saying that we're right. It's just what we think, and we know that on some that it's not the general consensus, and some people will disagree. So if you do disagree, we are really keen to get your thoughts because, again, I thought the constructive debate and feedback we had on that Ubisoft video was really good, and it's sort of become a bit of a slow burner for us on the channel. So we thought we'd strike while the iron's hot and get this Rockstar one out because it looks like this might be a way forward to go for the channel. So if you do agree and you do think you do want some more tier lists, it can be on other devs and we can look at publishers and things like that and other things to do with gaming. Let us know that you want more of the tier list and we'll continue to get them out for you. So pop something else in the comments, subscribe for more as well. We'll get that out of the way early. But Dan, as you are the person that is in control of the mouse, do we get started or is there anything else that you wanted to mention that I may have missed at the top right now?
No, I think let's jump straight into it and see where we go. Again, this is probably going to be one of those videos that might be a little bit boring to watch, but if you got us on in the background, hopefully we'll keep you entertained with some mildly funny comedy, and who knows, you might actually really like us.
Well, everyone's working from, well, most people are still working from home at the minute, and a really good thing that I like to do when I'm working from home is listen to some podcast. This is almost a podcast. It's a discussion. There's no scripting going on or anything like that. It's pretty uncut. So it's a good thing I think, to have one in the background whilst you're working along, and I think it's just good for that. So that would be my recommendation.
Perfect. Right. Let's jump straight in then. So, I don't want to start with anything too obvious straight away because we want people to stick around to the end, I think.
Well thought. What a businessman.
Yeah, I know, right? So, there's so many good choices here. Okay, so I'm going to start just because it's my namesake with Max Payne. Now,
I was like, what? Where's Dan? Oh, yeah.
now, to be honest, I think when Max Payne came out, it was kind of ahead of its time. It was the story was really really good. The graphics were nothing major, but then Rockstar have never really tried to do over the top graphics. Like you'd never go, oh right, a Rockstar game is a benchmark for a gaming computer. It's not like Crysis, but it was still really really good. And the fact that it was on console as well, I think it just made one of those kind of the whole sort of detective-y, I can't remember the storyline of the first one. It's really escaping me, which is why I'm rambling. But I can't remember which story it was, but it was the first one where his wife got killed or something like that, and
Yeah. That I
yeah, and
think that's the first one.
so it's basically Liam Neeson in Taken, just in a game form, and it's just so much better. But yeah, it was a really good kind of role playing game, I want to say, but it like because you are
Oh, here
playing,
we go.
you
Here
are
we
you
go.
are playing a role.
Another reference to the Ubisoft video. Go and watch that, and you'll see why that comment is ridiculous. But go ahead.
Yeah, you are playing a character, so that's a role playing game for me. But yeah, it was kind of thrown in the sort of detective thing, and it wasn't just your typical sort of run around and kill people. There was a good storyline to it, and probably one of the better storylines for a detective-y kind of game. And I would say not their finest hour, but certainly a good series. I would put the first Max Payne at least a C. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I'd agree with the general take on Max Payne. The Max Payne 1 and 2 lines are sort of blurred for me. I get mixed up between the two. I don't know if that's just because it's slightly older and I've forgotten bits about it. But a couple of things that I like that are synonymous with Max Payne. One, I suppose it's a graphical aspect, but the scrunched up face, do you remember that they had on
Oh
him?
yeah,
And he was like just angry 24/7. Love that. But the slow motion and jumping that's in quite a few shooters nowadays, I could be wrong. I probably am wrong when I say this, but for me at least, I feel like it was like you said, it's way ahead of its time. I feel like it was one of the first ones that did that, if not the first. Like the sort of John Woo thing where you're jumping through
yes,
the air shooting. I really liked that, and I hadn't seen it before. Again, it could have come out before, but perhaps I didn't see that. So it's just for me that I haven't seen it before. But that was a huge thing for me. So I think that takes it high. And I know we spoke in the last one about games being iconic, and we may have thrown that word out a little bit. But I think Max Payne has got it's infamous at the very least. But I think there's one next to Max Payne that's infamous a bit more. But we'll come on to that later.
yeah.
But yeah, Max Payne I think very solid. And I would bunch 1 and 2 together. And one thing I wanted to say after I've said what I've said about the game, how are we rating these? Are we rating them based on the game at the time, or are we rating them in hindsight for the present day?
Oh, do you know? I think we should. I think that depends on a game by game basis. So for Max Payne, like obviously they're not a recent game, so it's hard to judge them for like as how they were when they came out. And I think you can only really say actually at the time it was ahead of its time because we're looking back at it. So let's stick it as sort of in a hindsight kind of okay. So when it came out, it was ahead of its time because of this, and I think that's why we should be how we should be voting on it.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen is we'll base the games on base value now, and then at the end, like we did with the last video, we'll come to ordering the tiers in an order, and I
Yeah,
think then that's when we do it in comparison to the other games that are in that tier. So I think if we work just on the game's name now, and then we'll do the rearranging at the end, and then
yeah,
that's where we compare.
yeah. That's fine by me.
Okay.
I'm also happy to bunch Max Payne 1 and 2 together because I do think they were both really good games, and I would say usually everyone expects the sequel, in films and games and stuff like that, to never quite be as good as the original, and I would say that actually Max Payne 2 was for me it sits in the same place. It's as good almost. I wouldn't say it was anywhere where it was letting me down. It was a different story, and there was enough difference to keep it fresh, if that makes sense. So I'd be quite happy to put Max Payne 1 and 2 in C.
Yeah, I'd go C. I'd think like top end of C, but again, we'll come to that at a later point. Um, but I'm not sure they hold up nowadays. But again, we'll come to that later. But yeah, C for now. I think that's fine.
Cool. Your choice.
Okay. I will err on the side, well, akin to what you just did, and we'll go. Well, I think obscure for Rockstar's probably the wrong word because everyone knows pretty much everything that's on the screen at the minute. But
Which,
have you
which,
ever
by the
played?
way, is a really good sign because let's face it, Rockstar was originally a British games publisher. So, you know, throwing that out there because
Yeah.
got to have a little bit of pride.
A lot of their work still happens there as well. I think
Exactly.
in Leeds. I think that's one of the places Rockstar leads. I think that's one of their biggest ones. But have you ever played what I thought originally when it was shown was a tech demo for when the 360 came out, but then they released it as an actual game? But have you ever played Rockstar Table Tennis?
Um, I did see it, but I didn't play it, and it was because I was thinking along the same lines, and I'd never had a 360, so I've been PlayStation throughout the whole of the console generation, so I've never actually played it.
Okay, I did. Um, it was a launch title for the 360, but I picked it up a bit later because it was about £3. It's obvious. There's obvious constraints on it. It's a table tennis game. I mean, there's not too much further you can take that. But for when it came out and what it was, it looked really good graphically. That's, I think, why it was shown as a bit of a tech demo for building up the actual 360 before the console's release. But for what it is, and being a table tennis game with those constraints, it's actually really good. But my sort of dilemma I've got going on is, can you rate a table tennis game, even though it does table tennis in the best way it can and shows table tennis in the best light it can you rate it higher than certain games that have got a lot more, that are more expansive and there's more room to work, whenever it's not just table tennis and that's it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean, and especially like, I mean, I don't know how it played, but for example, I would find a table tennis game to be very static and not much replayability. I mean, I've this comes from someone who used to play Pete Sampras tennis on the Sega Mega Drive. Um, it was literally like the only controls were to move like left and right, and then to sort of hit the ball. I think give it top spin or backspin on that. And I enjoyed it, but for the 5 minutes that a match would last, and then I'd be on to a different game. And my concern is when the Wii came out and that had the Wii Sports with the tennis aspect on that, the motion control, because it felt so natural, that's what really made that whole game blow up. And the tennis was one of, I think, everyone's favorite things on that game. So I'm not sure if you can ever really compare any kind of tennis game if there isn't really very much motion control. So I would always put it lower down on the spectrum for that reason. So I never played it. What was the controls like?
Well, just before I do go into that, just to deviate slightly on one of your points, with the motion control for Wii Sports, there was a certain time where, well, you'd be doing it in your living room, you'd be playing a game of tennis in your house, thinking, "Oh my god, this is unreal." And whilst I'm talking, I am currently doing some backspin as we speak. Um, but they got to a point where you thought, "Hold on a minute, I could sit on the sofa, I can eat a burger with my left hand, and I can just move my wrist with my right hand, and it will still do the same thing." And most gamers don't need any help exercising their wrist on their right hand. So got to a point where the motion control was a little bit null and void. But anyway, thought I'd just get that one in there. Um, it could, it controlled really well and it played really well for what it is. But that just goes back to that point. It is what it is, and it does what it says on the tin. So I think because they had that to work with and they accomplished it, because you can't. There is just that glass ceiling there that you can't overtake with a game like that. And there was loads of rumors that because it was a Rockstar game, they'd smash the glass ceiling by allowing you to go away from the court and start killing the audience and driving off from the arena and stuff. I think those they were unfounded. I can't see that there's any proof of that. So working on the basis that it is a table tennis game and that isn't the case, I think it deserves to go middle of the range, but around like a D, because it
Okay.
does what it says. It just can't perform any higher because it's got those constraints.
That's fine. Yeah, I'll happily put it at a D because, like I say, I don't think it needs to be a bad game, but yeah, there is only so far you can take it. Now just so people aren't falling asleep, I guess, and staying interested, let's go for something that people are going to know. When I say no, I mean there's going to be a lot of heavily invested people in this. There's one obvious game that you're going to pick that I won't pick because of you have a tattoo of it. Um, so I am going to go for the. I think this is the Grand Theft Auto London one, right? This
Yeah.
is yeah. So obviously the top-down Grand Theft Autos are not a patch on the 3D versions. Um, Also, I think Grand Theft Auto 1 and 2, really, really good, solid games for what they were. However, Grand Theft Auto London kind of let the side down a bit. I was really happy because it was Grand Theft Auto London. You know, it's based in the UK, and you know, obviously being a UK publisher, it was like, yes, this is great. This is exactly what we want. But it just wasn't quite there. Again, because of the top down style of it, and I think they really missed a trick, and they are continuing to miss a trick by not bringing that back in the 3D world. So I would put Grand Theft Auto London as, I think, a C or a D.
Okay. All of the top-down ones I've not personally had much of a hands-on with. I have played them all, but not for very long because Mummy wouldn't let me because they're too old for me. Um, because I am, I was going to say only young, but I'm not anymore. I'm old and all. So I think they're probably best with you scoring them. But from what I've played and what I've seen, I do think that this probably isn't the better one. But what helps it, and again, it's a point that you've made, is that it's set in London. And I just love when games are set in this country. One of the reasons why I'm so excited for Watch Dogs Legion to drop next week. I'm finally waiting for a game of this sort of ilk to really encapsulate London and do something with it so it relates with me more and I'll find more enjoyment out of it. But yeah, as I said, I think I'm going to leave the top down ones to yourself. I'll obviously butt in with a couple of things, but I think you're best placed to be able to score these ones.
Okay. Right. Well, in that case, I'm going to probably put this in the D section. So the Grand Theft Auto London going into D. I may as well just wrap up the other two as well then.
Yeah, it's fine.
Just to save some time, I guess. So the original Grand Theft Auto, the very first one, it it was one of those that kind of, when it came out, it shocked a lot of people with what you could do. You know, you could just run people down. It was quite clunky in the controls, and definitely needed a lot of building on. But it was the initial idea, and from that we've had the amazing reaction to, you know, other Grand Theft Auto games within the series. So it might not have been great to start with, but it definitely did. You know, it was what birthed all of the amazing stuff that Rockstar was able to come out with afterwards. So I'm going to put Grand Theft Auto, the original one, as C. And I would also say that Grand Theft Auto 2, although it was still top down, they did expand on a lot of stuff, and they also made it a little less clunky with the controls of stuff, and it was also quite the sort of missions and stuff that you had to do was quite a lot different. And they included a few more things, so it was a bit more expansive. So I'm going to put that in C, but when we come to the ratings later, I would put GTA 2 ahead of Grand Theft Auto.
Okay. Well, there was a game that came out on PS1 at a similar time that I think was basically a clone of it, but for kids. And it was one of the Action Man games. Action Man games, shall I say?
Mm-hmm.
And I played that instead. And I feel like, I mean, this might be a bit of a strange comment to make, but I feel like it might have been a bit better. It was really hard, though, I remember as a kid. I couldn't do it. But anyway, I don't even know who made that. It might have even been Acclaim. Do you remember them?
Oh yeah, I remember Acclaim.
I think they did it. But yeah, I remember it being really hard. But I think it was very similar to the top-down GTAs. Right, am I having a choice now? Is that where
Yeah,
we're going?
yeah. You have a shot.
Okay. I shall. Do I go for one of my select few that you probably know about, or shall I leave them for a bit? I'll leave them for a bit, but I am going to go for one just to tie up a series because we've got two on there already.
Yep.
Max Payne 3.
Okay.
Controversial statement incoming, so if you don't want to hear it, close your ears for a second. I think it's the best Max Payne game. I really liked it, and I think it got quite mixed reviews when it came out, and people aren't necessarily sold on it. But I think it's the best in the series. I'm a massive fan of Max Payne 3. I'm playing it again at the minute on PC. I don't know why either. There's nothing, because it builds on the other two. You've got the slow-mo stuff that I was on about earlier, but that's been in it for years. Max Payne is even more of a deranged psychopath with his problems, his drug addiction and his drinking, just like it wasn't the other ones. it's basically just calling back to the first games with improved graphics and the controls aren't as clunky. But something about it just seemed to resonate with me. I don't know if it's because of the setting. It was actually in a really good setting. It was in Brazil, and you were a bodyguard for these like Brazilian socialites, and you were in the favelas and dealing with like the militia and the gangs in Rio and Sao Paulo and that. Um, I just thought it was really good, but as I said, it got mixed reviews, so I think that's going to be a very controversial statement. But is it a game that you've played at all, or you got anything that you could add to that, maybe?
So I've not. I played maybe about half an hour of it, and so I didn't really get too far into it. But my dad did play it when it came out, and he said the same thing. It was like, the reviews on it are really mixed. However, he thought it was an absolutely top notch game. So I'm more inclined to to listen to you, and I would say okay that I didn't put the time into it, but it definitely when I was playing it, it kind of felt like an early version of Uncharted, if that makes sense. Like from the half an hour that I sort of picked from it, it had that kind of feel to it.
As in
Um,
like the shooting and gunplay?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, okay, that's it wasn't too bad, but I just never bothered to pick it up again. I think that's probably why it's got mixed reviews, because like you say, the controls are definitely better than the original and second Max Payne, and also you're looking at the graphics just because it was a different generation, and obviously that time everything changes there, so that was yeah, graphically, it definitely looked a lot better. It was less clunky, but it never made me want to go back to it. So I don't know if it was just slow to start, and maybe that's why there was mixed reviews about it. But I mean, you put more time into it, so where do you want to put it on the list?
Um, well, first of all, I think I would. I mean, it's a bit of a strange analogy to make. It's not one that I think has been done before, but I would tend to agree with what you've said about Uncharted. I think it's quite like maybe the shooting on Uncharted 3. I think I'd 2 or 3, maybe I'd put it towards something like that. Um, but I think the story was quite good. I do think it may have been a slow burner story wise, but the story was consistent throughout, and it was quite solid for a Max Payne game. Um, Again, this will probably get us shot down, but because of what I've said about, but that's the one that I've saw through to completion. I didn't with the other two. I just personally would put that for those reasons above the two that we've already got in there at C. So I'd put it at B,
Okay,
but
yeah,
open to interpretation, I guess.
I'd be happy to do that. Like I say, put half an hour into it. My dad said it was really good, and yeah, I've just not really. Like there were some really good things about it, but just not enough for me to continue. So yeah, I'll go with that. Uh, right. So I think that it's probably time to drop something a bit big in there. When I say a bit big, I don't mean it's like a massive game changer or anything like that. But let's go for the Italian Job. So it was a weird time that Italian Job came out. So obviously it was closely related to the film, the remake of the film, and there wasn't really much of a story to it, but the style of the game was a lot like Driver, sort of the later Drivers, but it just kind of felt a bit like a rip off, and it's not like Rockstar to kind of take aspects of somebody else's game and work off of that. They're much better at having their own IP and then creating something spectacular.
Yeah, it's usually the other way around.
Yeah, exactly. And when the Italian Job came out, don't get me wrong, Rockstar had their little twist on it, and it was really, really good. But it just kind of felt like a generic Driver, and you would be mistaken for thinking that actually it wasn't Rockstar who published it. In fact, I kind of forgot that Rockstar published it. So when I saw it on this list, I was like, oh yeah, I remember playing that. But yeah, I would say this is probably one of the games that, again, it could have passed a lot of people by because it wasn't that great. And if you weren't really into the film, I don't really know why you would have picked it up. So I would probably put this down at the lower end of the spectrum, possibly D, but I'd be leaning more towards E.
Yeah, I didn't like it either. As I said, at the start, I'm quite a big fan of Rockstar, and I just don't think it followed the Rockstar formula. Um, it didn't get on with it. I didn't play it for very long. I put it down, and I probably moved on to a different Rockstar game that was more like a Rockstar game. But yeah, it just didn't click with me, and I didn't enjoy my time with it at all. So I would advocate putting that lower down as well. I would go E or F maybe, but you've said E and I've said E, so I think we can agree on E.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think even if there is a game that we put in the F category, Rockstar is never one of those publishers who gives a bad game. So an F in, Rockstar world is not a terrible game. It's just, compared to what Rockstar can put out, it's like bit lackluster, I guess.
Yeah, it's not necessarily like bad, bad. It's bad for Rockstar.
Yeah. If let's say, for example, you compare it to some of EA's games, then it would be absolutely stellar. But yeah, there are a lot of times where Rockstar have got such an amazing catalogue of games and IPs that they have. Something like that just doesn't really deserve to be in this sort of in the same category, I would say.
Yeah.
Um,
Coming to me.
yeah,
What are we going to
yours.
do?
No, yours. No, yours. Let's fire up.
Is that what we're doing then? We're going to alternate?
Yeah, why not? I don't see why that's going to be an issue.
Okay. I've had one of these games in my mind whilst we've been doing this video a little bit. I think kind of toing and throwing on what I'm going to say and place. The original Red Dead game, Red Dead Revolver,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's very good, but is that too? That might be a touch too far. It's not too bad, but it's in the Red Dead line of games. You've got to compare it with Red Dead Redemption and Red Dead Redemption 2, and of course, it's not a patch on either of those games.
Yeah, it's more of a spin-off, isn't it?
Yeah, sort of. It birthed that series, so it's got to be held in some sort of regard just for that. But it's in no way really related to it. It's sort of a generic third-person shooter. Um, Main character Red is just a cowboy. There's not really that much to him. And again, it doesn't follow the standard Rockstar formula. It's not. It wasn't open world or anything like that. It was a linear third person generic shooter, really. I know there is a few people that still got some sentimental value behind it, but for me, it wasn't their greatest. Because it did spawn the Red Dead Redemption series, I think it needs to be higher than the bottom. But for me, it's between E and D. But I don't know what you think on it. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I feel kind of comfortable putting it in D, not E, because I think it's way better than the Italian Job. And like you say, it does deserve to be held in some high regard because it did spawn Red Dead series. But yeah, I mean, it kind of feels like Counter Strike Source, I believe. It just kind of in terms of you've got a very generic kind of. It doesn't really matter too much about the character, which is weird for a Rockstar game. It's like, okay, just jump into a cowboy shooter. Go around, kill a couple of people. That was it, and it was like, okay, well, it's a good little Western shooter if that's all you're after, but there isn't really much of a storyline or anything that stands out about the game. Like if you don't know the characters really later on, like obviously, Red's got the scars on his face like John has, so I don't really know why they went and changed his name from Red to John, but maybe they wanted to disassociate themselves from that as well. So maybe that's something that Rockstar did to go, right, this was an early idea. We've kind of built on that, and then Red Dead Redemption came along. So
Yeah, it felt like, well, and this is in hindsight, but it felt like it was, they obviously sat around a table or something and thought, right, we want to do a Western game. We want it to take off. We don't know what the audience is going to think. Let's throw this at them as sort of like a tester sort of thing, to see what the reception is. Almost, it's kind of like they did their own little focus group, but actually released it as a main game.
yeah,
And then off the back of there being interest in it, because I think I either pre-ordered it or I got it really early, because I remember paying full whack for it, but I can't remember if I was the serial pre-orderer that I am now back in those days.
what with your pocket money?
Yeah, but the premise was really intriguing. So they basically sold it on the premise. So I think that was why then those games came later. Um, the Red and John obviously are two different people, but I see what you mean with the scars. It is sort of like they threw it to the wayside and thought, actually, we'll build on it, and then this is who it is now. Of course, in Red Dead 2, you saw how he got those scars, so then you know that they are separate, and it's
Yeah,
almost two separate worlds. But yeah, as I said, it seemed like it was a test they put out there to see what would happen, and then that's how the new series was created. So yeah, let's go D for that. Then yeah, I agree with that. That's fine.
cool. And now the only question I have is, obviously there's one here, this Red Dead Revolver, and for some reason it's duplicated here.
Oh yeah.
So let's just put them both in
Do you want
D.
me to? If I quickly, if I mean, you might have to do a bit of filler, but if I quickly look on my phone and
Hmm.
I'll see what platforms they were released on, and we could maybe, I mean, they'll probably be in the same place anyway, but it means we can place them both. If it was released on PS2 and PC or something, or Xbox, whatever, we'll put them as two separate. Yeah, it was on PS2 and Xbox, so
Mm.
they're the same game anyway. But let's just say that that one with the black on the top is obviously PS2, and the one on the left's the
Yeah.
Xbox one.
Yeah, and I don't really think it matters which way around they go because I mean, like I said, I'm a die hard sort of PlayStation fan. You know, I think back when I was younger, I would have gone, oh no, there's Xbox are terrible, blah blah blah. However, I do think the console wars are dead. So it doesn't really matter whether you choose PlayStation or Xbox now. Cross-platform is the way forward. Um,
Cross-platform gaming is the way forward.
yeah. Um, so yeah, I'd be happy to put either one, at the front when we eventually do that.
Yeah,
Um,
let's not spark that debate because that's why we're not coming back from.
exactly, yeah. And I'm also quite happy to sit on the fence now. I would have picked a side before, whereas now I think although I have pre-ordered the next PlayStation, there is really no reason to pick one or the other over there. But yeah, let's park that. So I am now going to go for one that we can talk quite a lot about, because it was huge, and I wasn't at the time. I never really thought why, or like why did this game get so big, other than it got banned. So you know which one I'm picking, Manhunt. Um, at the time, it was one of those games that no one of my age group could play because obviously it was an 18, and it was only on sale in the UK for a very short time before it got pulled from shelves because of all of the sort of horror aspects of it, I guess, with the serial killery kind of stuff. And all I remember is the stories that people used to say about it in the playground, about killing people with screwdrivers and stuff. And it was like, oh my God, this game, I need to play it.
Did the playground game of Manhunt come about because of this game, or is that before the game? I can't remember.
I think it was around before the
Oh.
game. But yeah, it was just one of those like, oh my God, like the only reason that game got so big is because it got banned. There was so many stories about it, and graphically, it wasn't amazing. The story, again, there wasn't much of a story. It was kind of just the premise of the game itself, which Rockstar are really good at. They wanted to shock and scare people and be like, right, these things really happen in the world. All right, so they might be a little bit embellished, but it was about a psychopath who was going around killing people, and just this time you got to play the psychopath. So it was like, oh my God, this is incredible. Since then, obviously, rules have changed quite a lot, and you can get hold of the game now. Going back to it, it's really not that bad. It's a little bit gory, but there are much worse games out there. Some games that we won't mention, that Oliver might have tried to pre-order.
No.
um, but yeah, I mean there are a lot worse out there now, especially if you look through the anime section on Steam for a start.
No,
But
look at the NSFW or nudity or sexual content. Look, just thank me later. Carry on.
I'm not sure thank is the right word.
I sound like a right pervert, but I don't care.
Yeah, but I do think that it was just a shock thing that got it banned, not because of actually anyone paying attention to it. I mean, this is completely unrelated, but it was one of those things. When I was a kid, I always I never understood why the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series, the theme tune was always Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, and it got changed, and I was like, huh, what's that for? Going back and doing research on it, it was because they didn't want the word ninja to be, sort of thrown around with kids because they thought it would instill violence. And I was like, why? Like, now it's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Everyone knew it was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and they were still ninjas. They were still turtles. It just they changed the name of it to Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles. And I feel very much the same with Manhunt. It's like, yeah, okay, Manhunt was worse in terms of, it had a lot of violence, there was a lot of gore, and it was a shock value thing. But that's the only reason it got banned. The game itself is it's one of those, if you pick it up on, super cheap, you can play through it quite quickly. There's not really much to it. It's just kind of what would happen if you were a mental case and went around killing people. That's kind of it. I don't think it's a great game. And just because it was so infamous, I would put it as a C.
Yeah, the game's the game, really. It's not about the game. It's, as you've said, it's about what comes with it. But it's one of the things that really originally made me properly fall in love with Rockstar, is because they just didn't care. They just wanted to push the envelope, and it was around that time where it was the first sort of comments from politicians and world leaders and things that were saying that games that they proper brainwash our kids, and they create violence and they incite hatred, and all they blaming murders on mainly Rockstar games, but various games.
Which has
and
all been
Rockstar
disproven now by proper scientific studies, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
For
Games
any
don't
parents
kill
that are listening.
people. Games don't kill people. Politicians do. Anyway,
Absolutely.
but
they don't feed kids, do they?
Exactly. But they just put the middle finger up at them and said, "Well, it's not the case. Look at this. We'll release this." And they did everything they could to get it off the shelves. But thankfully, it is back now. I, for once, when we ranking a game, I don't actually think we can rank the game for being the game. We rank it on everything that's come with it, because if it wasn't for the game, the rest of the stuff wasn't with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it needs to be elevated for what it did for the industry as a whole, because there's been things like that in films for the whole time, but it's not since Manhunt and other things that I know other things have contributed to it, but it's not since Manhunt and those other things that they've been able to put into games. All you got to do is slap an 18 on it. I know that doesn't deter everyone, but that's what they do with films, and people still watch films, so they're still going to play the games. It's not the catalyst for these things that happen in the world, and I think Manhunt showed that. So I think it needs to be recognised for that reason.
Yeah, and I also one of the big things at the time was you can't allow people to play this game because it desensitizes them to violence. No, it doesn't. Look at how many arcade games there were, like Resident Evil, for example, where you could go around and shoot a rotting corpse in the face with a shotgun, and that was people used to queue up and put money in a machine to play games like that. And you think, why was this game any different? If anything, I'm holding a controller. I'm not actually holding a screwdriver and trying to stab someone. What is that?
You're at home doing it virtually instead of out on the streets doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've also just seen that the first one is on the PS Store for PS4 for $11.99. So I'm very tempted to actually pick that up tonight and have a quick run before I go to sleep.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think you can complete it in about 2 hours. It's not a particularly long game.
No.
But yeah, after if you seriously play through the game, you kind of go, okay, I understand why it got banned, but playing the game, you just kind of go, it's all right, but it doesn't make me want to go out and attack anyone.
No.
So yeah, I feel like it deserves to be it deserves to be B, I think, because of everything that surrounded it. And like you say, Rockstar, it was a real middle finger to to politicians, to the industry. It was like, right, we can push this as far as we want to go, regardless of what you say. We're going to come out with this, and that gave power to a lot more other games. I mean, not just within Rockstar, but there was so much more that it allowed software companies to do and go, do you know what? Right, we can push the envelope on this because they got away with it. We could worry about this, but if we do what Rockstar did and then rein it in about 10%, we know we're okay. So yeah, I mean, I would put Manhunt definitely at a B. What are you saying?
Yeah, I think it deserves to go there for the infamy alone. I think obviously we've got to have that footnote where it's on B not because of the game and how the game plays, it's everything that comes into it. Because
Yeah.
people might tune in. I don't know why they're tuning in now, but if they did, they'd think, "Hold on, why is that there?" Well, that's why. I can't remember if it was the first or second one, where you had the pig and the clown. What was that? Was that the first or second one?
I think that was Manhunt 2, which I
Because
was
I've
gonna.
always remembered that for some reason.
Yeah. I'll be honest though. Whilst we're talking about Manhunt 2, we may as well pop that in the list as well.
Yeah,
Manhunt 2, it fell by the wayside in my eyes, and it was obviously the graphics were better. You know, the game mechanics were less clunky. However, they lost so much publicity compared to what the first one did. That I think I mean, when it got released at the time, I didn't even know it had been released, and
yeah.
it was one of those things where it was a few years later. I kind of thought, oh yeah, I remember that Manhunt game. I wonder if I could get hold of that. Then I found actually they released a Manhunt 2, and it was like, oh, because it wasn't the as scary as the first one, because we'd already seen the first one. It was like, oh, like in that case I won't bother. And
Yeah.
I think if there'd have been more publicity around it, if this one had got banned as well, then yeah, it'd be right up there. But I think Manhunt 2 deserves to probably be somewhere in the realms of D, I think.
Okay. It is a better game. They just built on the first one. It played better. It looked better, as you've said.
Hmm.
So I think if we've got the first one in B when the game isn't as good, but obviously we've rated it on the publicity, we've got Manhunt 2 less publicity, but the game was better. So I think it needs to be a bit higher than D. So I'd say C. But the publicity for the second game wasn't as much, obviously, because it's the second of something that's already happened. So it's never going to be as much. But the reaction to 2, I thought more, was that they'd released this first one and it got all the press that it did. And then it got banned in all these places, and everyone just thought, fair play, Rockstar. You've just released a sequel to it. It's just another middle finger up. So it's just building on what was already there. So I think for that reason, it can't be in line or as high as the first one because it just built on what was there anyway. But I'd say C because it just played better than the first.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. I could agree with C. Yeah, I'll put it there. Yours, I guess.
Okay. What do we want? I might get rid of a couple. I mean, it's not going to be anything a big fanfare, but you ever played the Smuggler's Run games?
I'll be honest, no.
Neither have I. I don't know if I should have known before, but it wasn't that long ago I found out they actually existed because, like I said, I tried to look at all the Rockstar stuff as much as I can because I'm a big fan of them. I never knew these existed, so I haven't played them. I am going to try them at some point, but for the time being, I haven't. So if you've not too, I think we could just shuffle them off and put them in never played.
Yeah, okay, so I think that would be the first one. I've got a feeling that's the second one. And then, see, this is weird because I'd guess that's the third one, but it could be the same and maybe it's just a
Yeah,
different version. I don't know, but
God
I
knows.
mean, the fact that they've released 3 of those games, possibly 2, I don't know, and neither of us know anything about them, they can't be that good, can they?
Well, yeah. Well,
Especially seeing as we're quite big Rockstar fans.
if any of the listeners have played them, let us know in the comments down below. Let us know if that is the order of 1, 2, or 3 as well. But let us know what you think down below because we haven't played them, so we'd be very keen to hear how they play and what they're like. Because I think I'm going to give them a go just because they're Rockstar. So let me know if I'm doing the right thing by doing that.
Whilst we're on the subject of never played, this Beaterator, I'll be honest, I never ever saw that ever.
Okay.
So no idea what that's about.
When I saw it there and I saw the Frozone type of bloke that's in the middle, um, I,
See,
it
I
really,
think he looks like a DJ.
yeah, I think he is. I
Oh,
remember
okay.
playing it, but I don't. No, I remember playing it, but don't remember playing it. So I know I've played it once, but I don't remember much about it. But I have played it, but I can't say anything on it, so it's got to go and never played. But I have played it. Great at it.
Okay, yeah, super useful. I'm putting it in
Yeah.
never played. So, but to be honest, I think the rest of them I have played at some point. So, I think that's kind of the quickest to get them out of the way. Um, okay, let's go for something that's another. I think is quite a quick one. Um, so I am going to go for Thrasher. Now, again, this was earlier days of Rockstar, and this was after the tsunami of how well the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater games had done, and it was just not a patch on the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater games. I mean, for me, what sold the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater games was the soundtrack, and always has been every single time. I thought, the game's fine, and it's fairly generic idea. Let's just go around doing a few skateboard tricks and some different skate parks in a different world. Essentially, kind of like table tennis. It's just you're very limited to what you can do. And it just isn't really in Rockstar's wheelhouse that to kind of, okay, we've got this idea because we've copied from somebody else. What can we do with it? Not really much other than change a few names and maybe how it looks. I definitely feel like it was just kind of ripping off or trying to just kind of jump on the coattails of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. And even if you compare it to other games that aren't Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, like Skate, for example, it's just not a patch on them. It's quite clunky, and like I say, it just doesn't feel like Rockstar.
I'm just not a skater games kind of guy. I don't particularly like the Tony Hawk's games either. I mean, shoot me if you want, I don't care. So it's all on you, this one, mate. I don't even remember if I've played these or not. I know I've played most of the Tony Hawk's games, and I've played the skate games. I'm guessing I probably have, but I can't have much memory of it. But as I said, it's not really my genre, so it's all for you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I'm going to put this in D. I think because it's like I say, it's kind of like table tennis in the fact that they've got an idea. It's not really their own, and they've done an all right version of it, but it wasn't great. So when there are other things going on, especially at that time, like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, they were never really going to do great. I don't think. You want to go next?
Yeah, can do. I think we've put it off for long enough. I think we might have to break into possibly the greatest game franchise of all time now. It's difficult for me, and this is another show, because most people on the channel will have seen my greatest Grand Theft Auto game of all time countdown list. I hope you have, and if you haven't, please go and see it because it's actually a decent one. Slight issue with the audio, but it wasn't my fault. Please persevere. It's actually an alright video for me, so it's for myself. So with the HD and 3D ones, people know what I think and what I put over each one. So I think it might be make a bit more sense if you give a bit more of your take. Obviously, I'll give mine because I can't not because I love GTA. So I am going to pick my favorite GTA game, that being Grand Theft Auto Vice City, which, as I've said in the other video, is just amazing. Set in 1986, perfect setting for a Miami. Why can't I say Miami? Miami Vice and Scarface themed game. It's got to be in the 80s. It's just fantastic. Tommy Vercetti is, I think, maybe even to this day, one of the best protagonists that they've had in a GTA game. Villains were great. Sonny Farrelly's great, but Lance Vance is even worse, which means that he's great. Double crossing, horrible. Can I say no? Go on, we'll stay family friendly. Double crossing, horrible. It's just fantastic. And I said in the other video, I can recite the first hour of the game script just off by heart. That's how much I played it, and it's just so good. So it's got to be an S for me, 100%.
I can't think of a single person on this planet that would disagree with you, to be honest. One of the things that people are crying out for with the upcoming, that we all know is there, even if it's not been officially announced, Grand Theft Auto, is that they wanted a throwback to Vice City, whether it was a remake or to include the map of it. The point is they want a Vice City. Do I think it's the best Grand Theft Auto game? I don't.
Yes.
There is a reason behind that that we'll go into when I pick what I think is the greatest one, which I also think you'd have a hard time arguing with. But I do definitely think that the game itself, Vice City, was one of those. It wasn't the first 3D Grand Theft Auto game, but it definitely was one of those that kind of, it came out of nowhere, and it was an absolute game changer. There was so much stuff that was in there. I think that's really where like I say, it wasn't the first Grand Theft Auto that was in the 3D setting, but it definitely was their best. They had so many different things like being able to buy the businesses, going to the strip clubs, and you sort of that's the first thing really that I remember. I mean, I know you could go into strip clubs on Grand Theft Auto 3, which was the first 3D one, but it definitely wasn't the same kind of feel. Like it was a lot more restrictive. I mean, everything was a bit more blocky and barely had any textures on it. Vice City, the colors were great. The soundtrack was amazing. The cars that they used were incredible. I mean, who doesn't want an Infernus when they're rolling around on Vice City listening to the radio?
Wild style.
Yeah, it's just absolutely incredible. I would say it's probably my second favorite GTA game ever, and the infamous mission of driving around those stupid little toy helicopters.
Oh God, that's one thing that brings it down.
Yeah,
I
but the
think
fact that that's so infamous, you can't then go, oh no, it's not a great game. It's an absolute world class game.
yeah, I think I know what your favorite GTA game is going to be, and that it is difficult to argue. I'd put them on par, just the sentimental for Vice City that brings it above for me. I think one thing that helped Vice City, and I'm going to have to say that because I got a lot of stick in the GTA video for comparing things with GTA 3. By no means do I think GTA 3 is a bad game whatsoever. It's in my top 10 probably anyway. But GTA as a whole defined that genre and defined the gaming industry as a whole. It's never been the same since GTA came out. And that is all started with the first 3D one with GTA 3. So, it's not bad on GTA 3 at all. But one of the things that helped Vice City is that it came out after 3, because 3, as I've said, was great, but it was minimal in what it had. And Vice City really built on that. So I think that lifted it up and made it look a little better just in comparison to the predecessor. But yeah, all the GTA games pretty much are fantastic, and Vice City just for me is the best one. So yeah, it needs to go in S. But I think the one that you're going to say is your favorite will also be right next to it in S as well, and I couldn't agree anymore.
Okay, so I don't know. So you know me very well, and there are two Grand Theft Auto. Well, there's three. Well, it's really difficult to be honest with Grand Theft Auto. They're all amazing games.
Well, the one that is your best one that I think it might be, it better be the one I think it is, otherwise we may fall out.
No, I think we're right. I may as well say it now.
It can only be between two.
Yeah, it's San Andreas, right?
Thank you. Right, good.
So the reason why this is my favorite is because it was the first Grand Theft Auto where you could kind of personalize your character. And it was the fact that you could choose what clothes you were wearing, you could choose how often you went to the gym, how much food you ate. You could have your girlfriend. You could decide that you didn't want to have your girlfriend. You could have the hot coffee mod, which was another one of those things that almost got the game pulled. Which again is infamous with Grand Theft Auto and that kind of thing. There was also the gangs that you could create. You had the fact that you could take over districts, and you could when it was under attack, you could go with your boys and just go and take it over again. I loved it, and there was so many characters in that game that played such a big part as well. Like, I mean, CJ was like, it wasn't anywhere near as iconic as Tommy Vercetti, but he's probably the second best protagonist in any Grand Theft Auto game ever. And it wasn't because of how he looked, or because obviously he was customizable, or what people did with him, or the game itself. It was also because he was the first black protagonist in a Grand Theft Auto game, and it was all based on how urban and everything was in that particular kind of. It's almost like based on the 90s kind of vibe, and it was to do with the
that's when it was set.
Yeah, and it was the run down kind of areas of America where you had the suburbs, but they were just like chain link railing fences that were around, and just wooden houses, and it was like the only real way to make a living was as a gangster, and it was kind of like your rise through that world, and it was certainly for me as a I can't even remember how old I was. That's depressing, isn't it? When it came out, but I'd certainly never been exposed to anything that was from the sort of African American culture the same way, and I thought at the time it was, it didn't matter to me that the protagonist was black, but looking back at the game now, and obviously with everything that's going on in the political spectrum and just the world over, it's actually takes some of the embellishments out of it, but it is really really good reflection of what was happening to those people at that time, and you didn't really have many options, and the music and everything that was in it was, again, it was one of the first times where I kind of came across, like proper rap and hip hop and stuff like that, and it was like, nah, this is amazing, and yeah, I think it was one of the things. I didn't see him as being a black protagonist when I first saw, when it first came into my life. I just wanted to play the game. Thought, oh, it's Grand Theft Auto. I can just go around and shoot some people. But it was the whole aspect of that kind of black character who's the first one. I was like, no, this is really good. And going back to it now, you still have that same kind of vibe. I think it doesn't go away.
Yeah, spoken like a true middle class white man.
Exactly. That's
The first
what I
time
mean.
I heard all this rappy stuff.
But that was the truth, though. It was the first kind of exposure to, I mean, obviously family friendly as much as possible, which is difficult on a Rockstar one. But there was a lot of racial slurs that were thrown around. Between black characters and stuff like that, and again, that was my first exposure to any of that, and it kind of it made me have a lot more respect for just African American, or not just African Americans, just any black person. It was one of those. Do you know what? I understand that I don't understand, and it was because of that game. And I know that sounds really weird because most people will probably go, "Yeah, no, that was a terrible thing for black people," but was it? I don't think it was. I think it was a not necessarily a good representation of everybody who is black, but it was definitely a good representation of that kind of person in that kind of timeline, and the struggles that they would have had to go through.
Yeah, I agree. Um, just to bring it back to the game inside, but it had all the old GTA tropes that are in it as well, because you get double crossed again for, well, within the 3D one, the third game in a row. You had GTA 3 where you get double crossed by Catalina, I think her name is.
Yep.
In the Vice City, you've got Lance Vance, and then you've got that age-old fool Smoke.
Big smoke.
And yeah, what a moron he was. And it's iconic when he goes through the drive-through with that order and everything. There's so many quotable lines and stuff from the game. And again, with the other one, gaming just wouldn't be the same without San Andreas. And I would hold it in the same light as Vice City. As I said, Vice City is my preferred one, but that is purely just for sentimental reason. There's nothing that holds it above it. Another shameless plug of the GTA video, and if you haven't seen it, I keep mentioning it, but you need to go and see it. But it shows on there. I've put together some clips and things of when you can get CJ fat, and when you go to the gym and you can get him muscular, and just all the things that it added. It almost brought sort of a bit of the Sims sort of vibe to it, but it really worked with it.
And you could swim.
Yeah, you can swim.
It was the first one where you could swim.
Yeah, they weren't allergic to water anymore. You can fly around free will, just get jets, and you've got a jetpack, and had Area 51, and they introduced all of the gambling in Las Venturas that they tacked onto it, which is just their take on Las Vegas. And just to touch on it briefly again, it really did show the struggles and things of those times in the 90s on the West Coast for people that you've mentioned there. So yeah, it fully deserves its S ranking, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think there's anywhere else you could really put a game like that.
No.
Okay, next one.
Okay, next one. I would like to discuss. What would I like to discuss?
I'm not sure.
Because it's between two categories, and it hurts me to say that it's between two and not just straight up on the top. I'm going to pull up for the first Red Dead Redemption game.
Okay.
obviously very good again, and it's a word that we said in the Ubisoft one, as I've mentioned earlier, iconic, but it's going to be used a lot more in this Rockstar one because a lot of these games are just iconic. Um, but the first Red Dead Redemption is iconic and a very, very good game. I think nowadays you might have to add on the caveat of for its time because we have developed since then.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, it's not retro, so to speak, but we have gone on. The gaming has gone through generations since, so it is for its time. But it's fantastic. My dilemma that I alluded to a moment ago was I would want it on S. However, I don't know if it might need to be on the top end of A because the second game, which we'll come on to, is just unreal. Like the second game, I think, in my humble opinion, is one of the games of that generation. It's so good, and it is better than the first game. I don't really think you can argue that. I think it is better than the first game. There is some slight detractors from it, but there is for all games. But there's some that say that the first is better. I don't think it can be argued. I think every argument you've got for the first being better can just be outweighed by an argument for the second. So I mean, it's a slight spoiler. I think the second's going in the S tier, but I don't
Yeah.
know if the second goes in S, is the second towards the top end of S and the first is the bottom end of S, or does that mean that because the second's so good, the first has to drop down to A?
So this is going to be one of those where we probably get shot down in the comments section for it, but
Potentially.
um, I I cannot see Red Dead Redemption 2 being anywhere other than S,
Yeah,
because of it is, like you said, I think it's also the game of that generation.
yeah,
There is nothing that I've ever played that is a patch on that, in terms of the story, how invested you are with the characters, how it's almost like you take on a real life. I mean, you care about your horse, for Christ's sake. Like it's it it makes you feel like you are in that world. This being Red Dead Redemption 2. So for me, Red Dead Redemption was a great game, absolutely great game. But nothing has encapsulated me as much as Red Dead Redemption 2. So I would say, yeah, Red Dead Redemption is a great game, and without it, we would never have had Red Dead Redemption 2. But I would put Red Dead Redemption, the first one, in A, and top A, I would say, but Red Dead Redemption 2 S every single day.
yeah. I think that's the decision we're gonna have to make. Just to touch on the first one a bit more, they had Undead Nightmare that came out, which was the DLC. I mean, it became sort of standalone in itself at a later date, but that was good. With the zombies and everything, just adding to single player. It's in the back in the day where Rockstar used to put single player DLC out instead of just relying on a cash cow like GTA Online. But again, we'll come to that in a bit. Um, but that helped it. There's not many games that are better, so I don't like that it's going to have to go in a tier that's not the top. But it just makes sense because Red Dead Redemption 2 was just it was breathtaking. It was something completely different. They said there was a load of build up, and they said they were promising that you could talk to anyone that you walk past on the street, that your beard and your hair grew in real time, and it all
Horses'
came to
testicles
fruition.
were shrinking in the cold.
Horses'
Let's
testicles
be
shrink in the
honest.
cold, and when you are in the cold with your horse and you're trotting along, the footprints that are made are ridiculous. Graphically, the game is just on another level.
And
That
people
game
could
would
draw
pass
dicks
on
in the
the
snow.
yeah, that game would easily pass on the newer systems that are coming out soon, and you wouldn't bat an eyelid. It just two needs to go on S, but yeah, the first one it can't be sniffed at at all. The first one is also a fantastic game, but I think two is to the first one's detriment because it's basically here's Red Dead Redemption, and then here is Red Dead Redemption again, but everything's built on and everything's better. So it just makes sense that they're just one tier apart.
Yeah, and how the hell did they pull that off? I mean, Red Dead Redemption was a great game. Um, again, great story. Literally everything that Red Dead Redemption 2 has, it had in some form, and they just built on that. And I don't think they'll ever be able to do it again, where the sequel is actually better than the first. Um, but that's how I feel. And I don't think anyone would argue against that if they've played the two side by side.
No, and it also brings a point about the previous games that Rockstar did that they've also almost done as sort of tester runs, I guess. But Max Payne, I said one of the things that really sold that to me, and I really enjoyed when I played the Max Payne games, was the slow mo shooting. Deadeye in Red Dead Redemption and Red Dead Redemption 2 is better than the slow-mo shooting in Max Payne, regardless of how fun that jumping around and stuff is.
Mm-hmm.
But doing Deadeye is a really good thing that they implemented into the game, and that's clearly taken from previous games and they've learned from what they've done in the past. So I think that was really good from them. But yeah, there's not many negatives that you can say about either game. The only negatives you can say about the first game are just because the second game does them better. So yeah, as I said, they deserve to go where we placed them.
Yeah. Okay. On to another one. So I'm going to pick a game that I never owned, only played it a couple of times. And I knew it was Rockstar. That was probably the first Rockstar game I ever played. And I only ever played it because my cousins had it. And it's The Warriors. Obviously based off the 70s film. I'd never seen the 70s film at the time. I have since, and it's all right. It's a bit tongue in cheek, but it's quite funny.
Why did you watch the film?
Because of the game.
There we go. There we go. That's it. Carry on.
Yeah, and again, it's weird how Rockstar kind of do their. I mean, not that they've done many, but their tie-ins with films. The Italian Job was a poor excuse. The Warriors, I actually thought was quite good. I mean, I put it this way, I can't put it in an S rank or an A rank, but I could see it going somewhere in B or C. I think it's way better than a D. It was violent. It was kind of there. It was like a side scroller Street Fighter kind of thing, which probably it wasn't unique at the time. It was fairly common. There was a lot of those going around, but yeah, it was done with that Rockstar twist. That sprinkling of things that are not quite right, things that are a bit tongue in cheek, and it just made it all work. So there isn't really too much I can say other than I mean I'd if I was looking at B and I was going at Manhunt, that was all about the press, really, that took it that high. Max Payne 3, as again, I never really put that much into it. Is it as good as Max Payne 1 and 2, the top-down Grand Theft Autos? Yeah, I would say so. So I'd probably be leaning more towards a C ranking. What about you?
I think that this really shows what Rockstar can do, because I'm going to say this to not incriminate. I played this game because a friend of a friend may or may not have stolen it from Asda, and I really wanted to play it, and I couldn't get a hold of it, so I got hold of it via other means. But why? I'm guessing I would have been 15, maybe something like that at the time. Why does a 15-year-old really want to play a game that's based on a film that came out in the 70s that they've never seen? That, I think, really shows Rockstar's pull and what they can do. And subsequently, like I sort of butted into what you were saying, I have now seen the film because of the game.
Yeah.
So I think that really says a lot about what it is. It came out of nowhere. Why have they made a movie tie into a movie that came out 30 years before the game released? It made no sense, but it sold well and people wanted to play it because they know what Rockstar can do. It's a third-person fighter sort of game. And I mean, and this is going to... Jeez, I'm shilling everything. I've made a video on the channel about Yakuza as well. I'm a fan of those sort of games, as it will show in the Yakuza video. So if you've not seen that video and you're interested, I'd go and watch it now. Actually, I'd watch the rest of this and then watch it after that.
Yeah.
Just have a little binge session, sort of XPL Netflix, if you will. But yeah, it resonated with me. I'm a fan, as I just said, about with the third-person fighter sort of games and genre, their own sort of genre within a genre with the fighting games, because they're a bit different to like your Tekkens and things. But yeah, I thought it was very solid. And the main thing that I've said at the top of there that really sells it to me is they made a game, a movie tie-in to start with, which are always terrible, but it's a movie tie-in of a movie that came out 30 years before the game released, and there's people that weren't even born that were pre-ordering and buying it upon release. That just needs to show. That's just mind-blowing, and that just shows what it can do. So it needs to be the minimum of C, I think. But yeah, I can compromise with C. I was thinking maybe bottom B, but I will take C. Yeah, it it shows how big Rockstar are and what they can do. That they can just take this random thing and just say, "Here you go, here's what we've done," and people will just lap it up. And I think that's massive.
Yeah, I mean, I am happy to put it in B. Like I say, it was for me. It was between B and C. Um, the only drawback that I have is in putting it in B is it as good as, like I say, Max Payne 1 and 2 and the top down GTA's for what they did. I mean, if you're happy
Yeah,
for
the
B, I'd be quite happy for B as well. Because, like I say, I never really had the game. I only played it a couple of times around my cousins, but it did make me want to go and watch the film. And it's weird. Why would I want to go and watch a film that was 30 years before I was born? It's mental. So
Yeah. The only thing that I've said with the compromise for it to go on C is because if you strip that back and look at the game, is it as good as Max Payne 3? Is it on par with some of the things that are in C? Yeah, probably. Um, I mean, I know they're sort of different generations, especially the first Max Payne, but Max Payne and Warriors, which is better? Potentially the first Max Payne for what it was at its time.
yeah.
So I would probably compromise and put that at C. But again, just a quick one, just to touch on the film. It's currently installed or recorded, whatever, on my Sky Q. So are we watching it again soon?
I think it was on Netflix not too long ago as well, so it might still be there as well for the UK anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. On to the next one.
Right. Okay. Let's go for this. I say this, and people come back to me. Apparently, it's quite controversial. Apparently, some people didn't like it, but I think it's because they took it in the wrong way because it's a Rockstar game and it wasn't. It sort of is open world, but it is more. It leads you down a path, so it's a little more linear. But you can decide what you want to do in. I mean, they're not missions, but missions per se. They're actually cases, which might tell you what this game is. It's one of my favorite games of all time. I love this game for what it did, and that game is LA Noire. You're a detective and you detect, but you basically go
Really?
around. Yeah, you basically go around. You're in LA, and they've actually called it LA, so it's fully realized. Um,
Oh.
but
Okay.
it's in the when's it set? 40s, is it something like that, or is it 60s? I get confused. It's been a while, but it's back in the day. But you play as a detective, and you find clues and you try and solve murders basically. But one of the things that really shone was the interviews where you could choose whether you think the guy's lying or whatever, because they all based it on this brand new technology at the time, and I don't think it's really been replicated since. But I think they did it so well. But they did the scans and things for the actors, and they did facial expressions, so you could see. So, say if a guy was lying, he'd be looking around the room and not making eye contact, and be shifting and things like that. And at the time when that came out on 360 and PS3, that was way before its time, and no one had ever done anything like that before. And I was going to say it's again something that may have changed that genre, but it's not really a genre that's utilized too much. But I don't think in any other games that, even to this day, I mean, I know it's improving just as it is as time goes on, but I don't think that there's facial expressions and things that are used in the same way since. And I think that's really something that games are missing out on because I think it was so good. And again, it was way ahead of its time. And I thought the story was stellar. I thought the main character, Cole Phelps, was really good. He's played by one of the guys that is in Mad Men, which is a show that a lot of people like. It had some quite big names in it, and it showed LA in that time and what it was around that time period, and it showcased that really well. I think graphically, not just with the facial expressions, I think it was really good. They've done a few tweaks and improved textures and things on the re-release on PS4, which is really good. And they've released a DLC with VR support, which is just it's ridiculous because you've got those facial expressions and you can see them in front of your face. It's like you're living in the future, and it's a game that was released years ago. It's weird. It's a bit of a mind f, let's say, because it's family friendly still. But I can't speak too highly of this game. I really like it, and it's a game that I have 100%ed on 3 occasions now on 3 different platforms. And I like to complete games when I play them, but I only tend to do them once unless I love them, and then I'll do them twice, and I've done this 3 times. So I think it shows how much I like it. So if you don't agree with where I'm going to put it, we can do a compromise, and I can compromise one of yours later. But I cannot have this anywhere lower than S.
Do you know what I would be hard pressed to argue with you. I mean, I would have said maybe A, and the only reason is because people have been wanting a sequel for so long and they just haven't delivered. I know, they've kind of brought it along and kind of, done the VR side of it, but again, it's not really anything different. I mean, it's exactly the same game. It's just, the cases aren't any different, right? As far as I'm aware.
On the PS4 version, the cases are the same, but on the VR version, there's new cases for the VR.
Right. Okay. But yeah, I mean, I know this game is a really really good game. It's not one that I've really played too much of. It just didn't grab me in the same way. But it's a typical Rockstar game. It's one of those. It's always got its little things to it that keep people going back for more. And I can't really see it as being a bad game at all. So I'd be happy to agree with you. I just think that Rockstar, if you are listening, which probably not, but just give people what they want. Give them a sequel. Give them different cases. Then that's not asking for too much, and it's a cash cow. So yeah, if you want it S, I'm happy to put it S. I don't think it when we do the full breakdown and everything. I don't think it deserves to be necessarily at the top of S, but definitely within that group. Yeah, that's fine.
I'm happy with that because I know a lot of people, not a lot. I mean, I think it was a select group that didn't appreciate it as much as it probably deserved. I think a few people thought it was boring because they thought it was going to be one of those Rockstar games where they're just going to run around and do what they want, and it just isn't that game. But I don't think it would have worked if it was that type of game. I think the way it is and the way it's set out is perfect for the type of game it is. And you know what I think about story-driven games? The story was so good, and it's just on that narrative and the new gameplay features that were added into a game really for the first time. There's nothing that's like it, and since there's been nothing that's like it, and people have tried to emulate it and not been able to. And there's a reason for that. It's because it's so good. It may not hold up to some of the bigger titles like the GTA games and the Red Dead games, so I can compromise with it being on the lower end of S. Again, it's more probably sentimental value, but I think it just based on the game itself, it needs to be an S because I just think it was such a big game and a pioneer of its time, really.
Yeah. Okay. On to another one. So this now starts getting quite tight, I would say. There's a couple on here that
I thought it was family friendly. Oh, you're on about the list. Sorry.
yes.
There's one game there that I'm saving, by the way, and I think you know what that is. But yeah,
yes, I definitely do know. So I'm going to tie a couple together here. So I'm going to go with Midnight Club games. So I am, if anyone who's sort of part of this channel knows, I am kind of the racing game guy. That's where a lot of my time is spent, and I can go through the differences of all the racing games and probably tell you, what I prefer about this, and I could probably create the ultimate racing game by picking different parts of different games.
Oh, well, that's just giving me a flashing light above my head. I think that's a solid video idea, but yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm all about the ideas. But yeah, so Midnight Club, across the board, typically they are not anywhere near the same category as your Forzas, your Need for Speeds, your Gran Turismos, those kind of things. I'd even go as far as to say Ridge Racers. They're not your typical racing games because they've got that Rockstar twist. Now, the best out of all of them has to be Midnight Club 3 Dub Edition, without fail.
I'd agree with that.
And it's, I think it probably is the highest selling one out of all of them. And I think I think Los Angeles came out afterwards, but that was it. I think they just tried to emulate what Midnight Club 3 did, and it just didn't. And I think really that was back in the time where Need for Speed Underground was really king, and it was like if you couldn't get your hands on that, playing Midnight Club 3 Dub Edition was actually a really really good substitute. It was like, oh, okay, if I haven't got hold of that one, I can get this one, and it wasn't the same, not by any stretch of the imagination. People hold Need for Speed Underground 1 and 2 in the highest regard because of the amount of customizations and stuff that you could do. But as I say, Rockstar's little twists that where they do things a little bit differently. They had a couple of ideas that were pretty unique at the time, and it just kind of really brought it all to life. And I would say, if you're looking at what Need for Speed has evolved into, it is kind of on the similar lines of what Midnight Club was doing back in the day. It was kind of like a racing game, but it had a story, and it was more coming from the story side than a racing game, which is obviously why they're not the biggest racing games in the world. But Need for Speed are kind of one of the bigger franchises in racing games. They're kind of doing things the other way. They are a racing game franchise going into a story, and anyone who's ever played any of the Need for Speed games will probably tell you the stories are, I mean, they're pointless. It just go have a race, do up some cars, earn some money. That's all people really want out of a Need for Speed game. Midnight Club was the story version of that, and as far as stories go for a racing game, not bad at all. I would bunch all of the Midnight Clubs, barring Dub Edition, together because they're all kind of they're all right. Like you can play them. They're a fun game, but you might not necessarily sit there and complete them. Midnight Club 3 Dub Edition definitely deserves to be, I would say, in the B rankings. The rest of them could probably fall under D because again, they're more like stories that had a bit of racing there. There wasn't really too much to develop on, but like as I say, Need for Speed Underground 1 and 2 were very similar to Midnight Club 3 Dub Edition.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to agree. I think it's one of those ones again where you'll know a lot more than me on it, but just to sort of add my 2 pence to it, I think that they came out. I think the timing and when they came out was at its detriment because there was so much more competition and there were other things that offered different things. So I don't think they sold as well because of that. I think they're very serviceable games. I think the Dub Edition is better, so I agree with where you're placing them as well. They're solid racers. I think again it was another thing where Rockstar dipped the toes into the water of another genre to see what they could do with it, and it was for Rockstar average, I would say, as a whole, that series. But yeah, it's just it had its competitors, and the competitors just happened to be slightly better on the whole. So yeah, I think they deserve to go where you've placed them there.
Cool. Right, you're up.
I'm up. Right.
Yeah, not Europe because we're leaving, but
I think I'm going to have to go into GTA again. I am going to go for Grand Theft Auto Liberty City Stories. Now, it's the one with the black background, so I believe it is. Yeah, so it's just the PSP edition that we're going to go on. We won't talk about the port that went to the PS2 because the PSP one was made for PSP, so it wasn't as good on PS2. However, as ports go in that, it wasn't that bad on PS2 at all. But the PSP one's better, but it's the reason that I bought the PSP because I thought it was ridiculous at that time. Of course, things have changed since, but I thought it was ridiculous that I could play a fully fledged Grand Theft Auto title whilst I was outside, just in my hands, handheld GTA, as good as the PS2 versions were at the time. It wasn't as good as the PS2 versions are, but it for what it was and the system that it was on and the capabilities of the PSP, I think it worked really well. And I was happy that the reason that I bought the PSP was the game, and the game was actually good, and it worked for me, and I got on with it quite a lot, and I think I sunk quite a few hours into it. It was kind of based on events of GTA 3. I think off the top of my head, it was a prequel. It was just before it, I think. But the protagonist, Tony Cipriani, was a character from GTA 3, so there was no introduction needed, and it was sort of more of the same. And it garnered the sentimental value that you already had with 3 and just built on it, which I think was the best thing for them to do with a new sort of sideline entry to the series that came on a completely different platform. It doesn't hold up to the mainline ones, but I think out of the the handheld and sort of side ones, it's probably the best one. It might have a bit of competition with Vice City Stories that we'll get onto. But I think it deserves to be remembered for all the right reasons. I would put it probably in B. Is it one of the GTA games that you've played? Could you add anything to that at all? Or
So this is one of those. I haven't got too much to say about it, and the reason being is we did have a PSP in the household. However, it was my brother's, so it was Jake's, and he was never really into any RPGs or anything like that. So I ended up borrowing this game from one of my friends who also had a PSP, and I was only really allowed to play for a very short time because Jake had his PSP. I was always a Game Boy kind of guy, so I didn't really play too much of it. It was a little bit, and I kind of thought at the time, I thought, well, this is really bad. It's like it's not necessarily the story of it. I wasn't really into the story at the time. It was more of the let's go around and shoot stuff and drive cars and whatever. But I thought at the time, oh no, it's really bad. Graphics were poor compared to what I was used to on the PS2, and the controls were a little bit clunky. But if you look at the restrictions on the hardware itself, and as you said, when it because from what I remember, it wasn't brought out on the PS2 straight away. It was brought out like a little bit afterwards.
yeah,
I think it was like a year or two,
yeah,
and it was a straight port, but it didn't feel like a straight port when it came to the PS2. It was like, oh, I'm back to my normal controller, in my normal gaming environment, and I could play the game. And the game itself then felt better. So I don't know whether it was the restrictions on the hardware or just because the PSP felt totally different. But I thought it was really bad until it got the PS2 port. So I would say, in terms of a Grand Theft Auto game, yeah, of course it's not a patch on the main line, but I would probably agree with you in the fact that all of the other sort of side ones or the DLC kind of ones, is definitely probably one of the better ones.
yeah,
I would quite happily put this in B.
yeah. I think that's where it deserves to go.
Cool. Probably going to save the best till last. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but Oni, I believe, was on the Wii. I think that's where I remember playing it. If it's
want me to have a search?
yeah, go for it, just to see if it is the one I'm thinking of. From what I remember, if it was the one I'm thinking of, it was kind of like Rockstar's version of Red Steel.
No.
No.
Came out in 2001 on PS2 and Windows.
In that case, I might not have played it.
Action beat 'em up third person shooter. I don't think I know it. It looks anime sort of thing.
Yeah. So I must have played something similar to it.
Oh, it's a Bungie game, but it was published by Rockstar on the PS2 version. But it was Bungie and then published by Gathering of Developers. It says on Windows. So I think they just literally just took the publishing for it.
Right, okay. In that case, it's probably not the game that I was thinking of, because I don't know what game I was thinking of, but I played something very similar to Red Steel, which I thought, if you go back to the Ubisoft tier list, you'll get my thoughts on that. But it was kind of a bit more cartoony, and it was a really good game. So I don't know what that was, but if it wasn't Oni, then I've never played it. So I think it's fair to say that's going there.
Yeah.
Okay, switch it up to something else that kind of, I guess, spawned another series. State of Emergency. I think this was one of those Rockstar games where it's kind of missed the mark slightly, because I think it kind of spawned the Saints Row games, and what was the other one? The Def Jam games. That kind of took off after this had been released. It was one of those I borrowed from I believe it was called Choice or Choices, which is basically Blockbuster, for like a weekend, and then give it back on like the Monday morning or something. And I never picked it up again, and it was just like it was almost like a cartoony version of Grand Theft Auto, and that's what I was fully expecting it to be, but it just didn't really have any of that Rockstar sparkle, I guess. I'm not even sure if that one, like it might have been similar to Oni in the fact that they might have just done the publishing, because it never felt like a Rockstar game. It was kind of a third person shooter, beat 'em up, kind of run around, go and do stuff, but it was more about the politics within a gang. And yeah, I just never felt like it really clicked with me, obviously being a middle class white boy. So that's probably where that comes from. But I would say it's probably, this might be the first F. Now, obviously, people will shout at me if I'm wrong. But what are your thoughts on it?
I've definitely seen it before, but I don't think I've ever played it. Just whilst you were talking, then I've just gone to give it a search just to see if you were right, and I think you are right. I think they are just publishers on it, and it was done by somebody else. VIS Entertainment. It was done by. I've seen it, but I genuinely think I may have only seen it in like shelves when I was younger. It was being sold. I don't think I've played it, so I think I'm leaving this one to you. So I can't really complain if you're putting it in F. But just on that topic, I think from the ones that we've got left, the only ones that I have played are obviously all the GTA ones and Bully. I don't think I've played whatever the fourth one from the left is and whatever the last one is. Can you see what they are? 'Cause I can't tell from my side. I may have, but I can't quite tell what they are.
Yes, so this one, this blue one is Surfing H3O. I've also never played that one, and the one at the end is Wild Metal. Again, I've not played it, so I think we can just drop those in never played, because we can't really say anything about them. Again, if people have played them and think that they're worth picking up, or at least mentioning, drop us a comment, and we'll get back to you. As you've probably seen in most of the comments that we have on our channel, we do respond to them. So even if it's just a little bit of a like, or having a conversation. But yeah, I've got to put State of Emergency in F. Like I said, I did play it. It wasn't great, and yeah, you can kind of tell that Rockstar didn't really have much to do with it. Okay, so we'll cut that bit of silence. So next, I guess I think I know which one you're saving till last. So let's go for another one that we can talk quite a lot about. Is Grand Theft Auto 4, and this is where we've spoken about this privately before. I think when it was. Again, not to hark on about it too much, but when you were doing a bit of research on and sort of planning out your Grand Theft Auto video, we had a little bit of a discussion, a little bit of a disagreement, let's say, on Grand Theft Auto 4, because as far as I remember, I said that the main game was way better than the episodes, and you were kind of like, no, it was the episodes that made the game for me. So I would put Grand Theft Auto 4 in, and this might also be controversial, A, because I think it does everything that Grand Theft Auto 5 does, but not as well. I really love the characters. Nico Bellic and his cousin Roman. That was that was the funniest part of that game for me.
That was the funniest part of my video when I went, cousin, let's go to Titty Bar.
Hey, Nico. But it was typical Rockstar. It was very stereotypical, like Eastern European kind of stuff, and all the accents are very kind of tongue in cheek. But yeah, it was. For me, I think it was probably the first Grand Theft Auto game where I was more in love with the fact that I could mod it on PC and turn the cars into real cars, because obviously they don't have licenses for the correct badges and stuff, even though they they put loads of time and effort into making the cars as realistic as possible. And it was the first game that I'd put a HD texture pack on, and I'd put the real world cars mod on it. And I think that's kind of where people started to really mod Grand Theft Auto games, and probably more because of the mods, really. Because I remember a Hulk one and Iron Man one where you could fly around or you could just trash stuff. But the graphics were great, which is it's probably at its time was the best Grand Theft Auto graphics ever, and probably if you could compare it to any other generation of Grand Theft Auto on the hardware that it came out on, I think you'd be hard pressed not to say that it was actually the best graphically of its of any Grand Theft Auto generation. But yeah, I mean the controls were ever evolving with the Grand Theft Auto series. The accuracy on shooting was a lot better than it had been previously, and it was really. It wasn't just like another Grand Theft Auto game. It was another step up in a Grand Theft Auto game, and I think that's kind of where Rockstar had kind of taken off. From the Vice City and San Andreas were kind of similar games, just in different environments, and then Grand Theft Auto 4 was the next step up, and it was obviously on a different generation, but they made the most of what the hardware could do, and it was like the largest map that there had been so far on a Grand Theft Auto game. And it was just good. There isn't a lot I can say about it other than it being good. However, there are better Grand Theft Auto games, so I would quite happily put this at A.
Yeah, I'd agree with A. That's what I've been thinking the whole time. That's where I was going to put 4. I'm a big fan of 4. I really like it, but it does have its naysayers as well. Because I think Rockstar tried to go a different way with 4, and they wanted it to be a bit more dark and a bit more gritty. And I think they may have just gone slightly too far into that side of the spectrum. Whereas GTA is known for the tongue-in-cheek and the humor and everything, there wasn't as much in this game.
Mm-hmm.
So I think some people didn't like that fact. It's still brilliant. It's a GTA game. There isn't a GTA game that's bad per se. But I do think it's the weakest entry into the mainline games. Of course, 3D and onwards, it's obviously better than the top-down stuff. I think it was a fresh take having Nico not be American. That was something different, and I think something that was warranted, because you don't have to just play as that typical American every single time. It's bringing other things into it, which Rockstar don't like to shy away from delving into other avenues and potentially peeing off certain people. And I think that showed that by implementing that choice. It looked fine. It was, as you said, a step up to the next generation of console, and it needed a GTA on that console, and they delivered. I think if we're doing GTA 4, I think we should clump in the episodes as well, because I know you touched on them briefly.
Yeah.
And I know you said that the episodes made it for me. They did, but they also didn't as a plural, if that makes sense.
Yeah, one of them did. The other
one
one
of them did, and one of them I'm not that fussed about.
Yeah.
So if they were 2 separate entries and we could place them separately, then they'd go in different ways. So I think that would be the only thing that may drag it down from the S where I'd want to put it. Because Lost and Damned, I thought, was good, but I don't think it had a patched on Ballad of Gay Tony. I still go back and play GTA 4, so I think that shows that it well deserves a top sort of echelon of A. But episodes and Ballad of Gay Tony, I still play now. I still do all the ones that you spoke about on GTA 4. I put them on Ballad of Gay Tony because I think Ballad of Gay Tony's better. I'm a massive fan of Ballad of Gay Tony. I loved going in and managing the clubs, and can I say that word? No, I can't say that. Let's say having intercourse with the girl that run the cameras and stuff. That was great. Loved that. And I was around that age at the time, so hormones loved it too. But that was more of coming back to what GTA is known for, and the original theme with the tongue-in-cheek humor and everything. They brought that all back with Ballad of Gay Tony, and it just seemed that was the proper Grand Theft Auto experience on the new systems with the PS3 and Xbox 360. The proper well-known and what everyone was waiting for GTA experience was on Ballad of Gay Tony. and I think it really complemented the darker tones of the GTA 4 and Lost and Damned entries. And I think they mesh well together and they really work. And the story was fantastic. Tony Prince is great, Luis Lopez is great, and all of the characters on there are fantastic. And when they brought the episodes in and they showed how they intertwined with the main story of GTA 4, I thought that was really clever as well. And it was a really clever way to bring a DLC into it. And again, it's the times where Rockstar are going on to the single player DLC, which I just think was much happier times because I really want that nowadays. So I think it deserves to be recognized. But because of what I've said with the 2 episodes that you have to kind of put them together and rank as a whole, I think they should be included in the same sort of level as GTA 4. I don't think we can really make proper cases for them being higher or lower than that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with Ballad of Gay Tony. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. I loved the fact that it was the first character that it brought in. And this is what gets me is that GTA is Rockstar. They keep kind of pushing the envelope as to what's acceptable, and they're not just doing things typically either. So you had the in Grand Theft Auto 4. You play an Eastern European who just wants to work hard and earn some money for his family. That it's very stereotypical, but then the story that you go on with him is not that at all. And it's not just I want to work hard and provide money for my family. It's no, I want to make a better life for myself, and I want to set up a business with my cousin. And like it wasn't, it's a very stereotypical story, and what you could go, oh yeah, you could say it's racist. But then they also came out with Ballad of Gay Tony, and they were like, right, this is the first main character of a game that was gay. And it was like this was before it was the same way that it is now. Obviously, as far as I'm concerned, it was acceptable. I don't care if you're gay or not. The whole point I care about is if you enjoy our videos. That's all. It doesn't matter what's going on in the real world. Rockstar will just kind of go, right, this is what we think needs to be spoken about, and they'll put it in a game. And I think making Gay Tony, it was not a stereotypical gay man. It wasn't just kind of mincing around everywhere and only dressed in pink floral shirts or whatever. But he was also he was on the bad side of the law. It was a bit edgy and a bit out there. I thought some of the stuff that his lines were really funny, and yeah, that was a great part of the DLC. Lost and the Damned. Jesus, it kind of felt like it came out of nowhere, and it was the complete opposite. It was really dark. It was really gritty. It's like 2 sides of the same coin. It was trying to be, but it was 2 sides of different coins. Like it almost seemed like the DLC was completely separate from each other. Not necessarily from GTA 4, but definitely from each other. And I didn't like the way that Lost and the Damned was brought into it. I think the way that the Lost and the Damned have continued in GTA 5 is much better than they were in the way that they were introduced in GTA 4.
Yeah, I think that was the intention. I think they wanted it to be 2 completely different things. But the fact that they did that, I think, just makes me like Ballad more, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It sort of shows me what sort of thing I prefer, so I'd just go down that lane instead of the other one. Yeah, Tony was good. Obviously there's a few jokes in there with regard to his sexuality and everything, but he wasn't on the whole. He wasn't on the whole treated differently because of his sexuality, apart from some characters that you meant to not like anyway. They kind of used it then.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was like by the main character and everything, which is the person that he meant to empathize with. He didn't treat him any differently to any other character, which I thought was quite groundbreaking as well. But yeah, I think both GTA 4 and episodes both deserve to be an A. And if they were separate, I'd put Ballad of Gay Tony an S because I really like it. When I had the physical version, because you could get it as a DLC, but you could also buy it standalone too. And when I don't know if you know, but on the 360s, if they moved at all when they were playing something, it would do the rings on the disc and completely just mess the disc up. You couldn't play it again.
Oh, wow.
And I think I sat back or something. I had a wired controller because my other one was charging. and it just moved slightly from where it was, and it just scored these massive rings into the disc, and I was devastated. And it took me ages because I was still a bit young at the time to be able to get another copy of it, and then I eventually did on PC. And it's been there's only a select few games where I've been that devastated when I've broken them because I break things a lot. And I think that just showed me how much I really liked it. So yeah, they deserve to be at the top end of the tier list as a whole. But we'll come to actually arranging the A tier at some point. But for now, yeah, I'm happy with them being there.
Okie dokes. Right, let's jump on to the next one. Do you want to take this one, or I don't know? It's up to you. Whatever.
Um, yeah, go on then. Let's go for. I mean, it shouldn't be too long because we've touched on it with other ones. But GTA 3,
Mm-hmm.
the start point really of the Grand Theft Auto series, because I don't. You've got aspects and things from the top down ones, but GTA 3 was the start of it all really. Um, it as I've said in the here we go again. As I've said in the GTA video that I did, that you can go and watch on the channel whenever you'd like. Um, it doesn't particularly hold up nowadays to some of the other entries in the franchise. Um, However, at its time, there was nothing else like it in the market, and it opened up a new genre that had never been done before. It was the first time that you could just go around a map and do whatever you wanted, and break the law and things like that. It hadn't really been done properly to any sort of bigger extent in the past. And ever since GTA 3, there's been so many clones of GTA. You've obviously got the GTA games that have come out as a consequence of 3. And they've built on it even further. And it's the backbone of Rockstar, one of the biggest publishers and devs around. And we would be doing a disservice to Rockstar, the genre as a whole, and GTA 3 and what it's done for the industry and what it's done for Rockstar if, regardless of how the game plays nowadays, if GTA 3 doesn't go on S. I think it just has to. There's no other way you can go without it, because without GTA 3, 90% of the games that we've already put on this tier and we're waiting to put on the tier wouldn't even be a thing.
Yeah, I have to agree. Again, the gameplay itself is awful. If you go back to it now, the textures, there aren't any. Everything is very, very clunky, but as you say, it defined that kind of. I don't want to say role playing game, but
You would be wrong, but yeah.
yeah, but it defined that kind of that whole genre, where it was the first time you could really go around kind of doing whatever you wanted to in almost an open world, and there were so many different things that had just never been thought of before.
Yeah, but again, from what I've said there, you've just said almost open world. Nowadays, 100% agree, it is almost an open world. But at the time, that's an open world. That's what they had. That is an open world for them. So I know we've said at the start that we don't know whether we're going to do it in hindsight or for when it was. I think we have to do this from when it was, because at the time, it was an open world. It was the first of its kind. No one had ever seen anything like that before. Nowadays, we can go and say, controls are clunky and things like that. I don't even think they were clunky at the time. That's just how controls were back then, and that's just how systems worked and things. So we've just got to look at it for back when it came out, and it's just got to be nowhere other than S.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I will agree and pop it there. Next one for me is going to be, I think, Grand Theft Auto 5. And that's because I know which one you're saving till last. So, Grand Theft Auto 5 is one of those. First of all, let's talk about the elephant in the room with it. It's the most recent game, which was released in, I believe, 2013.
Yeah, September the 19th, 2013, I want to say.
I don't know about specifics. I think it was around that kind of age. So we're talking at a game that's not far off of a decade old.
Yeah,
And
17th or 19th it was. I'm going to check, but go on.
And it's going to go to the next generation of games. It spanned 3 console generations by the time the next one comes out. And each time it's kind of done something slightly different. So with Grand Theft Auto 5, when it first came out on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. It was a lot on that generation. I don't believe the online was a thing.
Yeah, but
Well, it was in very early days.
yeah,
Uh,
it was like the online for GTA 4, and then GTA Online became its own thing.
yeah, but it was one of those things where it was quite limited. You know, there wasn't really a lot to do, and it was more of a gimmick. When they brought it to PlayStation 4 and um, Xbox One, it was kind of Grand Theft Auto 5 was like the game, but no one really bought it for the game. They bought it for the online, and the online kind of took over, and that's really what made it so. I don't want to say iconic because we've said it so many times, but it is
Oh yeah,
iconic.
yeah,
You've
it deserves iconic.
Yeah, you know, there's so many new things that you could do in it. I mean, you could switch between one of three main protagonists that come from completely different backgrounds. That the characters of, I mean, if I hear their voices now, like I could tell you who they are, and like some of the lines in it are like just brilliant. The the characters themselves and what's the word? What word am I looking for? The communication that they have and um, the word escapes me, but
You've been drinking.
yeah, could be. The way that they interact with each other is really good. And some of the minor characters like Ron, for example, like they just the Rockstar seem to think about all the little things, and it's the little things that they've put into the game that make it so good. And for me, without how far they went with Grand Theft Auto 5, including all the little details and all the little things that make it as good as it is, they would never have been able to do what they've done with Red Dead Redemption 2. So there's so much of it that just kind of makes me go, do you know what? This game is amazing. It has to go in S for me, not because it's the most recent. Just it's because everything that they've done with it. So the online is literally its own thing now. Um, the games there's a reason why it's spanning three console generations and hasn't changed in almost a decade. And then also it's the single game that I have spent the most money on, that you spent the most money on, and also let's not forget Jake, who let's be honest is tight with money, has also bought this and spent money on in-game currency, which he never does for anything. He barely even buys his own games. So for the fact that it's made him buy it and then spend further money on it is just incredible. I don't know what more they could do with Grand Theft Auto 5, with the upcoming Grand Theft Auto 6, which let's be honest we know is happening. Um, what more can you do? It's everything and more, and it just means that if Rockstar have already got that on their plate, GTA 6 that comes along, everyone is expecting it to be this absolute monster of a game. It kind of worries me a little bit, because what if they let us all down? What if it's not as good? What if it's not as crisp? What more can they do? What more can they add in?
I think GTA 6 will be. I think it will live up to it, because if they implement things from GTA 5 and Red Dead 2, then that is literally just the perfect basis for the next game. But I wholeheartedly agree. I think that GTA 5 definitely needs to be an S. I think it might be if not, it's one of the top two or three best-selling games of the last 10 years, and that just speaks for itself. The amount of, I mean, for us as the consumer, it's not about the money, but the amount of money that Rockstar have made on GTA 5 is just astronomical. The sort of figures they're talking are just completely out of this world, and that just shows what kind of game that is. Again, it's a game of its generation. Another one for Rockstar, where they've taken a genre that they created, really, and built on it, and that is the game of that genre. There isn't a game in that genre that's any better or even on par with GTA 5. They took all the things from the previous GTA games, built on them, added even more to it, and with GT Online almost just nowadays being its own separate entity, even just the single player, I think deserves to just be on S. The three characters that you touched on, that was a fresh take that came in, and I think that was really good. I don't think they should do it again, but I don't think that's because it was bad. I just think they, should try something different. But Michael was great with his own backstory. Franklin was great with his own backstory, and Trevor was more of the stereotypical sort of GTA thing, but it wouldn't be the same without Trevor either. They all had, I think, little bits of what the previous characters had, and they sort of encompassed all of the games into one. It was back in the same sort of area as the San Andreas games, with a bit more added to it. So you've got Sandy Shores and things nowadays that was more of Trevor's stomping ground. So I think that they added on from that game. And yeah, the numbers speak for themselves. As I said earlier, there's no other way that this can go other than S, and the demand for it has been shown from the re-release they're going to do next year on the new consoles, which I've just seen is Q3 and Q4 somehow. God knows why, because I don't know what else they're going to put onto it, but there we are. Yeah, and with something that is just a side piece of the game, with GTA Online becoming its own thing that's bigger than most other AAA titles that have come out since, and it's not even a full game, it's just on the side of a different game. That, I mean, again, speaks for itself. It's about another thing that I said in the Ubisoft video, is a word that I keep seeming to say in videos, and I don't know why, but it's a behemoth. It's huge, and it deserves to be there. There is some detractors now, but with stuff that's got that sort of name and carries that value, there's always detractors to it, because they just think it's the cool thing to do, don't they? There's not a person on this planet that can really say that it's a bad game, I don't think. Personally, there might be bits for them that they didn't enjoy, but they have to see it from all perspectives, and I don't think there's one person that can genuinely sit in a room and have a conversation with someone and that person come out of the conversation thinking, yeah, that person's right, it is bad. I don't think that's possible. So that has to just show that it needs to be on S.
Yeah, and also I've got the feeling that with Grand Theft Auto 5, it gives the player a sense of a moral compass. So with all the other games, it's kind of like it's almost encouraged to run around like a headless chicken and just go and cause absolute carnage and chaos, and then there's no kind of backlash for that. But then with the way that you play each character, kind of gives you that moral compass. So you start playing the game, as Franklin, and then Michael's introduced, and it's like it's a bit of a moral compass. Like, okay, this is some guy who wants to make some money, wants to get out of his current situation. Very similar to the backstory of CJ in San Andreas. And then Michael is this millionaire, and he doesn't know anything about, but he just sort of takes Franklin under his wing, and then he starts learning a bit more about him, realize he's not this god that he thinks he is, and he's got a bit of a backstory. And then you get Trevor, who is kind of the epitome of, like you say, every person ever who's played Grand Theft Auto is like absolute carnage and chaos, and off you go, cause as much terror as you want. But because it keeps pulling you back to Michael and Franklin, it's that kind of sense of, right, Trevor's your psychopath, but then the other two balance out the character. So I think that'd be very hard to do a similar kind of story without having those three separate playable characters, because your head wouldn't be able to take how one person can go from absolute mental case to somebody who's just wants to have a nice life and just live the easy life, versus then somebody else who's got that drive and ambition to be a career criminal. It's like, yeah, it just kind of culminates everything in one. And yeah, I can't see a better game on this list, really. I mean, other than other Grand Theft Auto games, there is nothing better than that on this list.
Yeah, I mean, I would disagree, but only slightly. I'd hold it in the same light as other games, but they're just games that for me on this list are better. But I don't think it's gameplay wise. I just think it's because it's just the games that I've liked.
Yeah. What's next? Okay. I can tell you that Chinatown Wars is my least favourite Grand Theft Auto game ever.
Yeah, same.
And I would kind of. I feel bad about saying this, but I can't really see it going higher than D.
No, I'd agree. It was made for the DS. It had the DS's restrictions for that system. I liked how they tried it, and I liked how they tried to get GTA to broaden itself and go over to more platforms. For a DS game, it wasn't too bad, but if you're holding it in the same light as the rest of the franchise, it has to be down low because it's just not the same sort of game. It's top down again, which I've already said before, didn't really wasn't proven to be the best version of GTA. It's better than the other top-down ones because it's just newer and they can build on it. But you have to judge GTA as GTA, and it just isn't a typical GTA game. And it goes back to that Rockstar formula, and it doesn't necessarily follow it. So yeah, I'm fine with that.
Cool. Um, and then, do you want to go Vice City Stories next?
Yeah, can do. Have you played the GTA that was on the Game Boy Advance?
I did.
I've not. So if you want to do that quick, and then we'll move on.
Okay, it escapes me because it was such a long time ago. It was kind of like Chinatown Wars. It was the controls are actually quite good for the type of game, but again, it was very limited because of the hardware that it was on. And unless you had a Game Boy Advance SP to play it on, you had no backlight either, so you could only play it, either with light shining at the right angle so that you could see what was going on, or in the day. Um, and yeah, it just kind of, it was very lackluster. It was the sort of thing you pick up and play because it's GTA, but you put it down again after 5-10 minutes and think, oh, I haven't got much story here. It's, it's not the same. You don't get the same feel as you do when you're on a console, and it was because it was handheld. And I would say that this is probably, it doesn't deserve to be any better than Chinatown Wars because it was an older system. So I would put it in D.
Yeah, go ahead. I've seen bits. I've never played it, so I don't think I can really fairly make comment.
Cool. Um, okay, because I know you're saving Bully till last. We'll do Vice City Stories.
Okay. So with Vice City Stories, that was the second PSP game they did after Liberty City Stories. Again, I think this one was ported to the PS2. I don't think it was took as long as the Liberty City Stories port took, but it was a little bit of time. Um, it was solid for what it was. I was quite hyped for it, bearing in mind, as I've said, Vice City is my favorite GTA game. I thought that this would be the same sort of thing, but handheld, which is again a reason that I bought the PSP so I could play Liberty City Stories. Um, I think that might have been a problem that I had is that I hyped it up that much that I don't think it fell flat, but I don't think it lived up to my expectations. But I think my expectations may have been a bit too lofty. Again, in hindsight, the PSP and the hardware that the PSP has probably isn't as as good as we thought it could have been in the day. If that makes sense. But yeah, Vice City Story is decent. It's no gameplay wise and everything. It's no worse than Liberty City Stories. In fact, it probably builds upon that a little bit and is a little bit better to play. But just because I expected so much of it, I didn't click with it as much as I did with Liberty City Stories. Um, it was main character was Victor Vance, who is the brother of Lance Vance. So immediately I wasn't too pleased with that because Lance Vance is my arch nemesis. But Victor is the person that's in the first opening scene on Vice City when Tommy does the drug deal and there's an ambush and Victor dies in that. I think he comes. He's either in the passenger seat or the pilot of the helicopter. I think he actually in the passenger seat. 'Cause I'm pretty sure he comes out with the briefcase. But yeah, so it harkened back to Vice City. It was a prequel. I believe it was set in 1984, with Vice City being in '86. So it elaborated a bit more on the beginnings of the story of Vice City, which I thought was nice. So I could get a bit more from the story of that game that I do love. Um, but of course, it didn't match up to Vice City. That goes without saying. But I think I'd put it on par with Liberty City Stories, but I just personally preferred Liberty City Stories. But I don't think that Vice City Stories is a worse game at all. So I'd put it in the same region that Liberty City Stories is going.
Yeah, that's fine by me because again, I didn't have a PSP. Jake did, and I couldn't get hold of this game, so it's not one that I've played. I have been back since then, and had a look at the gameplay and stuff like that. And when I first saw it, I did kind of want it to be like almost like a light version of Vice City. But again, hardware restrictions and stuff just made me go, oh, do you know what? I'm just going to turn away from it. So yeah, I'm happy to put it with Liberty City Stories.
Yeah, I never really gave it the chance I should have, just because I as well thought that it was going to be more of a Vice City Light thing, and it wasn't that sort of thing. So I've not given it a chance just based on that being a standalone thing and separate to Vice City. And I think it deserved me to give it that chance. So I might go back to it. But from what I remember and what I played, it's the same sort of thing as Liberty City Stories with a different kind of skin and a slight couple of tweaks. So it doesn't need to be any lower than Liberty City Stories. So I think we need to give it its due there, sort of benefit of the doubt. But yeah, I think B is perfectly fine with myself.
And I think we both know where this one's going to end up. So, Bully, I'll jump in first because this is your favourite game ever. Um, I When it first came out, I didn't play it. I didn't know anything about it, and I think when it first came out, it was on PlayStation 2. Um,
Yeah.
and then I picked it up probably about halfway through the PS3's life cycle, but it was on PC, and it was one of those. I think I got it in a Humble Bundle. If you don't know what that is, it's a website where you can get a load of games that have kind of been packaged together on the cheap, and it all goes to charity. So go and check them out. Um, but it was, yeah, I got it for I think I donated like £20, and I got like a big collection of games, and it was obviously from like previous generations and stuff. And I thought one day, I'll just give this a go and see what it's like. I didn't realize it was Rockstar until I started loading the game up, and I was like, oh, okay. I hadn't heard of it previously, and it was kind of in the era where Grand Theft Auto 4 was on the horizon, I think, or it was out. And the first thing I thought was, oh my god, the graphics on this are nowhere near as good as that. And then I thought, well, I'll give it a bit of time, and I actually really, really enjoyed the game. It was typical Rockstar tongue-in-cheek kind of stuff. It was an IP that I don't really think they thought would ever be much, and I think actually it's probably turned out to be like a hidden gem almost, because a lot of people don't realize that Rockstar made Bully, it's also a game where a lot of people have played it, but they don't remember that they played it, or it's not one of those games where they go, oh yeah, no, I used to love that game. It's like, Bully, do I recognise that name? You show them the pictures of it, and it's like, oh yeah, no, I do remember it. Um, but yeah, great concept for a game. And it was really fun just going around as a kid. Just running around playing absolute havoc with the school. I really enjoyed it, and definitely can't wait for there to be a second one. Rockstar, if you're listening, yeah, I that's about as much as I can say about it. I know you've got so much to say about it.
Yeah. I don't know how much I'm going to say on it because I am looking at doing a video on it at some point. But yeah, as you've said, it's my favorite game of all time. Um, it's not necessarily for how the game plays; it's sort of as the whole package, just everything into one. Because I do understand, and that on if I think we're going to do some videos at some point of our list of like our top 10 favorite games, each one of the member of the team. Um, but there's going to be games that are in my list that play better than this and are better games as gameplay wise. But this will always be my favorite game. It's um, again, was sort of touching on with the Manhunt thing. When it first came out, there was a big media blitz on it saying that it shouldn't be released, and it almost got banned in the UK. It wasn't released as Bully in the UK. It was released as Cans Canem Edit, which is the motto for Bulworth Academy, which is the school in the game. Cans Canem Edit is Latin for dog eat dog, and that's what's tattooed on my arm in homage. But yeah, so it's got that media publicity and everything that brought Manhunt up to the upper echelons of our tier. The game was just fantastic. The graphics weren't a problem because, as Dan said, he picked up the game at a later date when it was it came onto a newer generation, but it was actually a PS2 game. So for PS2, it was completely serviceable. It was there was almost a cartoony element to it, but it was because you were played as a 15-year-old. Jimmy Hopkins as the protagonist was excellent. The voice work in it was excellent. The gameplay was brilliant. It was just a different take on Grand Theft Auto, and it dropped at a perfect time for me because I was at school as well myself. So I could relate to this a lot more than I could relate to a GTA game, because at that point I wasn't going around shooting people and running people over and doing hookers and things like that. Whereas obviously nowadays I am, so I can relate to GTA a bit more. But at the time, Bully was exactly where I was in my life. I was a bit of the troubled youth as well. You could explore not only the school grounds, but you could go into the town of Bulworth, which was brilliantly realized as well. There were so many things you could do. You could go to the carnival, you could go on dates with girls. It was, I think, the first game where there was a bit of the gay community came into it, because you could not only go on dates with girls, you can go on dates with boys and you can kiss them both. So that was really before its time, because that's a time where probably, I mean, nowadays it's still a bit taboo and I don't think it should be, but at that point it was even more so. And I think it broke down those barriers in some way as well, because a lot of the publicity blitz that it got was also about that you could do that, which is obviously, as we all know, unacceptable. But it helped to combat that as well. um, there was different factions in the school, just like you get with like your typical film, but the factions were really good. You had the greasers that were the mechanicy kind of people, standard bullies. You had the jocks, which obviously in the title, the sporty guys, the nerds who were at the library, and the preps who were preps, trust fund babies, basically. They were all great. And the soundtrack I've got all on my phone. That was brilliant as well. Um, there's nothing about the game that I don't like. I'll go into a bit more detail when I do the video that I've said, but it is and will always be, unless there's something massive that can take it over, my favorite game of all time. And if a second comes out, I will book 365 days annual leave to be able to 100% it at least 10 times. Um, as I said before, if I 100% something more than once, I really like it. And I think I have 100% Bully 6 times now. And it's another game that I can recite a lot from. There's a lot of quotable things that happen in it. With it being a GTA, a take on GTA, but set with a 15-year-old, obviously you can't kill people, but you can get the weapons that you have in GTA are just changed up and modified to fit this game and the game's aesthetic and how the game plays. And you get spud guns and itching powder and all the
Catapults.
stereotypical, yeah, the slingshot stuff, all the stereotypical
Oh,
things
your
that you would
audio.
have at a school, other than spud gun, I guess. But um,
Hello?
hello, I think it might be your side.
Oh, okay, that was weird. It just kind of dropped out for a second.
Yeah, yours dropped, and then a Hoover started. Where
Yeah.
was I? Oh yeah, yeah. So all the stereotypical kind of things that you have at school, other than the spud gun. But the story was great. I think about taking over Gary. It's another double cross because it's Rockstar, but Gary, I always hate Gary. And a lot of people, when it came out, politicians and things like that, thought that because it was called Bully, that you would just be a bully and you'd go around. But it's the complete opposite. It's like the antithesis of bullies, because it's you are against the bullies. You're trying to save a group of kids at the school from bullies, and Gary, who is the bully of the game, the main antagonist, is picking on people like PT, who is your sort of stereotypical person that would get bullied, a smaller person, and you kind of take him under your wing and look after him. So it's nothing like it was perceived in the press, because, as I said, you're against the bullies, and I think it does a lot to help people that may be going through those sort of things in their personal life as well. And it's just another one of those where the press and the media outside of gaming media shot it down for all the wrong reasons. And this has to go in S, and there is no argument that I'll have that it can go anywhere else, because this is the greatest game. And I said a minute ago that it won't ever be overtaken. It could easily be overtaken by Bully 2 if that ever comes out, because that could build on that with what we've got nowadays, and it could be one of the greatest games ever. But then, even so, it's this one's still going to hold that sentimental value, so it still might not. But yeah, I'm going to play it again in the future at some point, and I'll do it 100% it for the seventh time, because on PS4 I've completed the main story, but I've not 100%ed it yet, and I've not got the platinum. But that will be the seventh time, so that will be happening at some point shortly. And when I say that I'll go back twice on a game that I love, I've gone back, and I will be going back 7 times. So come on, it's SS plus.
Okay, well, I'm not arguing with you. I do think it's great. I think it's an early um, version of Grand Theft Auto that was kind of aimed at kids anyway. It was like, look, here's Grand Theft Auto, but a bit more relatable for you. Because I think they also realised that lots of people who were not 18 were playing Grand Theft Auto games. So they kind of thought, oh, let's aim it at that audience, and it was an absolutely stellar job. I mean, yeah, not everyone went to a private school, and would not have not just a private school, but also a boarding school, which is what Borworth Academy is, and it was. Yeah, it was just absolutely great, and there were rumours not too long ago that Bully 2 was being thought of, and that they were Rockstar were posting jobs for voice actors for what was it? I think it was like scientists or something like, but specifically for the UK. So I'd like to see that happen. I could see a Bully 2 doing very, very well.
Yeah, there was I think in that job listing it said professor or something, so a lot of people thought it was for Bully. They've also the some of the band that played some of the soundtrack apparently what? That's the same noise I've made twice there. But anyway, it was kind of recent, but they said that they had been invited back for another project by Rockstar. So the Bully 2 bandwagon is starting up again, but it's been rumored for so long, and then it never happens. So I'm not too optimistic at the minute, but we'll see. If it does come out, it'll be fantastic. I don't doubt that. But yeah, if it never does, the first game is more than enough as well. So I'm happy that that goes in S. But shall we come to the end in finalement and sort of conclusion of the video with these sort of take note tier lists, as I think we're going to start calling them.
Yeah.
And how we start to quickly, conscious of time, obviously, just start to order the actual tiers.
Yes, so I think what we should do is just fire off as quickly as possible, like running through these, starting by lowest tier, and just basically go gut instinct first, and then if we have any sort of disagreements, we can then speak about whatever the issues are then. So obviously for E and F tiers, there isn't anything other than the games that we've got, and you can't really do the never played. So instantly we've ruled out 3 tiers there, so we don't have to do those. Let's jump in at D.
Yeah. Who's going?
Why not? I'll jump out with this one. So I don't really care about any of this particular category. I think that you can't really you can't really order any of these. I would say maybe Red Dead Revolver going at the top of D. So if we say that left side is better, and then right side is worse, I would say Red Dead Revolver probably at the top, just because that was the thing that spawned Red Dead Redemption, as we said. Other than that, I really don't care.
Yeah, I'd put Red Dead at the top as well, because we've marked other games up for being the start point of big series, like GTA 3 and stuff like that. So, and the first Red Dead and everything, as in Red Dead Redemption. But again, Red Dead Redemption and Red Dead Redemption 2 wouldn't be there without Red Dead Revolver, really. So I think just on that, it needs to go to the top, regardless of how it plays. But I think it plays better than I mean, you can't really compare them, but it plays better than the top-down London GTA and stuff. So yeah, that works perfectly for me.
Okie dokes. In C, I would like to see. I'd kind of say that this is almost in the right order. The only thing that I would change is maybe the position of the Warriors, and I'd I potentially put it after Max Payne 2. What do you think?
Okay, I was thinking from left to right: Max Payne 2, The Warriors, Manhunt 2, GTA 2, GTA.
Okay, I can agree with that. Yeah, I could see that.
It
I
was I was conflicted with Warriors as well, but I think the two Max Payne games together as a combination
yeah.
just tad better than Warriors.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to the story, the whole bullet time thing with the slowing down. Yeah, that's fine. B, I would be hard pressed to change this as well. I think this is the right order. Manhunt. I mean, B, because look, as we said, it's more to do with the media and the outrage that it sparked. That's what made it so infamous. I mean, Max Payne 3, yeah, I could see it being, second place to that. I really can't see the handheld version of the stories for Grand Theft Auto being better than Midnight Club 3 Dub Edition. But what do you think?
Um, yeah, I'm alright to compromise, but mine's was just based on gameplay and the ones that I've played the most. So I don't think it should necessarily be taken into account. But I was thinking Max Payne 3, Liberty City Stories, Vice City Stories, Manhunt, Dub Edition. But I'm still happy with where it is now anyway. So I'm kind of fine either way.
Okay, this is going well. Mind you, it's going to come to a sticking point when we get to the S tier. I know it is.
I'm not sure it is.
I'm in control of the mouse. Let's not forget. So A. Do you know? I know what your thoughts are of Ballad Gate only above Grand Theft Auto 4, but because it's linked with um, Lost and Damned, I find it hard pressed to go above Grand Theft Auto 4 for episodes from Liberty City. Red Dead Redemption, the original. Yeah, I think that's in the right place, to be fair.
Yeah, I'm fine with that being there. I don't want to keep giving flack to Lost and Damned because Lost and Damned is good. I just don't think it holds up to the other things that are there as well. But yeah, just based on that, I'm fine with it. If it was Ballad of Gay Tony separately, then we might be having a different conversation. But yeah, I'm fine with those three like that.
Perfect. So S tier. This is where we're going to have a couple of disagreements. I think now, I would say, not necessarily that they're all in the right order because that's not the truth at all. I would say these two are probably so Vice City and San Andreas probably the right way around because more people would care about a Vice City remake than a San Andreas remake. And that's not just from personal opinion. Like I would prefer a San Andreas over Vice City, but we both know how iconic those games are. In particular,
Yeah,
Vice City.
I think five goes into that as well. I think people would prefer to see Vice City again because we almost got San Andreas again with five.
Yeah. So I mean, I would quite happily put Grand Theft Auto 5 behind San Andreas because it built off of there. For God's sake, move. There we go. But in that order, I think there is a lot of wiggle room for the others. So I also would probably say Red Dead Redemption 2 in front of San Andreas.
Yeah. Okay.
Not necessarily in front of Vice City, but that, in a few years' time, if we look back at this list, that could potentially move in front of Vice City. So
Yeah.
you're staying very quiet there.
Oh, well, I think we can agree on GTA 3 being at the bottom of S,
Yes, yeah.
because we've put it there because of what it is and what it means to it. Gameplay wise, it obviously doesn't match up to some others in this list, so I think we can agree on that being there.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got these last two games, which is probably the sticking point. So go on, give me what you want.
So LA Noire is not really for me. So I'm fine with it being in S because of how much it means to you, but it's not. It doesn't make a difference to me. Bully, I've played. I really enjoyed it. However, it's not my favorite game of all time. I would put Bully behind GTA 5, but I know you wouldn't. So
No.
I think
So
LA
I
Noire is better
yeah
than GTA 3,
yeah.
and I think it then becomes where do we put Bully?
Okay, so let's work on the compromise then. I will allow you to put LA Noire one above GTA 3 and behind the rest, so long as Bully is at the top of S.
Oh, I don't know if I can do that.
Yeah,
Oh, I
that's
don't.
that's a compromise. I also compromised on the entire ordering of the B tier, so there's two compromises for one.
All right, then let's do it. I mean,
Yes.
just because Hey, no, that was the other way around. For God's sake, there we go. Um, yeah, I'd say I'm quite happy with that list. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I if it was just me doing it, like I say, I would put Bully behind GTA 5.
Yeah, I think this is the most I'll admit, but if I wasn't looking at it with the rose tinted glasses because of what Bully is and what Bully is for me, I can admit that there's games there that are better actual games. Like Red Dead 2 is a better actual game to play than Bully. But Bully is Bully for me, and I just can't, I won't budge on that. So there we go.
Yeah, which I knew when coming into this, so that's not really the end of the world. Um, I think we can probably end it there. Um,
Yeah,
uh,
should we? I'd like to see if, from the small community that we've built, whether, again, like I said at the top of it, if they want to continue seeing it, but if you do want to continue seeing it, if you could give us some suggestions of what you want to see next, it doesn't necessarily need to be a devil publisher, but we obviously can do them again because they're quite easy to do, as we've shown in this one and the Ubisoft one. It could be ranking gaming characters, consoles, anything like that. We're happy to do any of them. So if there's anything that you want to see tier list wise, drop something in the comments below and just let us know what you'd want to see next. But I was also thinking, this is sort of peeling back the curtain a little bit. I did the intro, Dan, so I believe the outro is probably one for you.
yeah, that's fine. So really, thanks for watching, or listening, or both.
For listening.
Listening. That's a when I can get my teeth in. That is a term that we are coining of listening. Um, yeah, obviously this is a long slog. It's been 2.5 hours probably by the time we've finished this. Might cut it down a little bit, but yeah, it won't be too much less than that. We really appreciate any feedback that we get. So off of our first tier list video, the Ubisoft one, which is probably it is the most similar video we have to this. We really like getting the comments. So just having that back and forth with people is really useful. So please keep doing that. Give us a like if you like it. If you don't like it, dislike it. We're not going to come at you with anything. We don't know where you live. Probably anyway, but get involved with us. We've got our social media up on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and do get in touch if you fancy playing some games with us on our Discord channel. We have got an active community of players on Among Us, and we'd like to see some videos. Well, hopefully we are planning on getting a video of us playing Among Us on the channel. I know Snow in particular is very, very eager to get that done. But we'd also like to, to extend that invitation out to you guys as well. So if you do fancy playing a bit of Among Us, not, if whether you want to take it seriously or not doesn't really matter too much. We
Slight disclaimer though. Obviously, we are, as we try to be a family-friendly channel. If you do join us for a game of Among Us, you may have to scratch off the family-friendly bit because some of the people in the community that do join us for those games are more on the expletive side of things, shall we say?
Yeah, and Among Us gets a bit heated sometimes. But also, if you want to play some of the other games that we're playing on the channel with us, or if you've got some thoughts about anything that we you want to see from us, or that we should be doing or playing, get in touch with us. That's the easiest way to get the content that you want. As I say, thanks for watching. Stay safe.